I dropped one cold chicken nugget into a starving miniature world, and by sunset, 87 tiny people were calling me their god. That nugget was cold, cheap, and leftover takeout from McDonald's. To them, it landed right beside their village like a golden mountain. I found them under the cloudy glass of an antique table. It was barely 5 seconds before a black-clad collector torched their last seed cart, cornering a girl no taller than my thumb. Right under there. Imagine this tiny Mara was fighting off two collectors while her family was trapped. The moment the torch touched the seed, I had to move. One cold drop from my paper cup fell through the glass like a massive water bomb, smothering the fire, knocking 3 men flat, and forcing their blade to miss. I flipped a clear measuring cup over their leader and 3 soldiers before they could even recover. Their leader tried to slip through the gap, but I dragged the cup. Its plastic rim caught him hard across the chest, knocking him senseless. Only then did the young girl pull her mother free, and that was when I noticed a crossbow bolt buried deep in her side. I pushed my finger through a weird, thick resistance under the glass, tearing some sterile gauze into tiny fibers, trying to hold pressure. A warm red stain touched my skin, and a sudden pain opened right across my palm. A dark purple bruise rose exactly where her blood touched me. This strange membrane refused to let me lift her into my world. The dying woman pressed a broken silver pendant into Mara's fist and whispered words I would only learn later: do not let the black half find the silver. Then her hand went completely limp against my fingertip, and the people around her were still desperately starving. I sliced up a leftover chicken nugget, cooled a piece down, and dropped it onto a broken plate shard. It landed near their town square, towering over their cottages. Mara quickly forced the adults to stand back, making sure they fed the hungry children first. A little boy took a bite, started crying, and hid half in his shirt for later. That was their first miracle. Everything after was the price. Honestly, my mind was still spinning as those kids started eating. Just 5 minutes ago, I was completely alone working on a broken compressor, an old estate sale table, and the depressing kind of dinner you buy when you are just too exhausted to care. The table was 4 feet long, brass-rimmed, and carved underneath to look exactly like a beautiful miniature valley. I had assumed it was just some overpriced model built for a buyer with way more floor space than actual sense. My apartment is basically one room pretending to be 3. A mattress behind a curtain, a utility sink by the workbench, and a kitchen counter I can reach without standing. This table arrived that afternoon from an estate cleanout. The owner only wanted the brass salvaged, and I always hated throwing away mechanisms I did not understand. I didn't call a single soul when the village first appeared, partly because it felt completely impossible, but mostly because the first useful tool in front of me was not a phone. It was a simple cup of water. Suddenly, the generator coughed, the floor vibrated, and smoke inside the table started drifting against the wind. Nothing under that glass looked fake, once those starving kids started reaching through cold ash for burnt seeds. Those tiny details crushed every excuse my brain tried to make. I leaned closer and saw crooked cottages, a dry stream, and faces so hollow their clothes hung loose. Dark riders were forcing weak villagers from doorways they could barely even slam. Mara was struggling with a heavy sack of gray seed almost bigger than her chest. Her mother desperately tried to push her toward safety. Finn followed behind holding a cracked wooden bowl. The soldiers caught all 3, but I couldn't understand a single word they said. The glass turned their voices into scratches and thunder, but I easily understood a heavy boot slammed on someone's back. I understood the cruel smirk on the leader's face as his men dragged Anwen to the cart. His short spear had a point so straight it flashed like a sewing needle. I noticed that, completely blind to why it actually mattered. The other guards had crude iron weapons, but his spear tip was different. Smooth, perfectly symmetrical, and far too precise for this muddy road. I noticed the mismatch because doing repair work trains you to instantly distrust one perfect, clean part inside a broken machine. I filed that away, completely unaware that this machine was much larger than the village. Suddenly, Mara bit a guard hard enough to make him howl. He violently shoved her down into the mud, but she came right back up with her teeth bared. The mother looked straight up at my reflection. It was only later that I learned her name was Anwen Rook. I'd find out that the young woman was her daughter Mara, and that skinny little boy was Finn. Back then, they were just 3 desperate people seconds from losing everything while I stood above them gripping my table. Once, for 7 long seconds, I had frozen while someone I loved died. That old failure forced my hand before my brain could even process. The water drop saved Anwen from the blade everyone could see, but it did nothing for the bolt already buried in her side. An amazing entrance, but terrible timing. Mara knew it too. She had stared from my giant finger to my face before pressing her hands on my skin. First came terror, then calculation, then rage. She trusted my hand simply because there was nowhere else left to put her dying mother. It was not because she believed the sky was kind. When Anwin's hand fell lifeless, Mara collapsed over her body, clutching her mother's silver pendant. The entire village square remained completely silent, except for 2 collectors weeping beneath my measuring cup. Around them, 87 starving people stared up at me like I was a god, but I had only patched their wounds poorly in a waking nightmare. Right before Anwin passed, I tried to pull her up to my world, but that invisible barrier tightened around my finger, like cold skin pushing me back. My modern world accepted plastic, gauze, and water. But it completely rejected her. I kept pressing my fingernail against her deep wound, desperately trying to recall basic first aid steps just to keep my own rising panic at bay. Mara cradled her mother's face. Meanwhile, a strict-looking woman named Celeste watched my clumsy treatment, clearly not mistaking my desperation for any kind of holy miracle. Anwin looked up at me one last time. Her eyes held no worship, only absolute, exhausted urgency. I stopped the burning danger they could all see, but arrived too late to save her from the poison within. It felt incredibly unfair, but it still hurt. Bitter hunger returned before their grief could even settle. Little children began sifting through dark ash, desperate for any unburnt seeds. An elder scavenged through ash until Mara slapped his hand away. She stumbled, so I immediately reached down for the golden food nugget. I kept 2 cooled pieces safe on my side. Only that exposed piece below would later turn completely sour. Here is the catch. That piece did not feed them for 6 straight days, it just bought hours to survive the next 6. I had no idea if their tiny bodies could even tolerate the grease, salt, or things I took for granted. Feeding them was pure desperation, not a real plan. I cooled the food until the steam stopped, placed it gently on a clean pottery shard instead of the wet mud, and held back while Mara chose who could eat. The lesson was brutal and fast. My massive pile of food meant absolutely nothing if these tiny people got crushed, burned, or trampled trying to reach it. Mara stood bravely beside the golden food chunk, wearing her mother's silver pendant with dark soot smeared all over her sleeve. She screamed orders at the crowd so fiercely that even through the glass barrier, I got the message: adults back, children first. One man charged anyway. Mara struck his shoulder with her broken knife handle. Good. Finally, someone down there was acting with a brain. She directed 2 older women forward, and they began carving off crumbs with knives and pottery. A piece the size of my thumbnail fed a whole line of kids. I carefully counted them twice. Exactly 87 people, including 7 children far too weak to even stand up. That specific number really mattered. Miracles make starving crowds look like statistics, and I needed them to stay human before my giant scale turned lives into simple math. Finn watched me the whole time, only eating when Mara forced food into his hand. He did not thank me. I respected that. Those 2 elderly women worked tirelessly, chipping away at the hard golden crust and passing tiny crumbs around in broken pottery bowls. One little girl licked grease off her tiny hands, then stared at them as if she expected the magical meal to suddenly vanish. One boy tucked half his food inside his shirt. Mara saw it, but kindly let him keep it. Hoarding is totally different when tomorrow is never guaranteed. Then, the kneeling began one by one. They fell flat into the wet mud. Some pressed their dirty faces flat, while others raised empty hands. One specific phrase kept echoing from their desperate mouths. They begged for high mercy. But Mara did not kneel. She pressed the silver pendant to her forehead and stared up with red, tearful eyes. "Can you hear me?" I asked. My English rolled beneath the glass like a deep storm. Most villagers screamed and covered their ears, but Mara just flinched and went completely still. "I hear you," she whispered, "but not in English." Not exactly. Her thoughts arrived crystal clear in my head, carried by the silver pendant on her skin. Her voice was incredibly rough, furious, and alive. My brain had completely run out of normal responses. I almost laughed and simply said, "Okay." She narrowed her eyes, asking if I was the creature that eats the sky, or perhaps some hungry, people-eating spirit. I explained I was just a repairman. She just stared. I sighed, meaning no. Behind her, an elder shouted for her to kneel. Another woman grabbed her elbow, but Mara aggressively shook her off. "My mother is dead," she snapped back. "My brother is starving. If the ceiling wants us to worship it, it can wait its turn." The ceiling? That was me. A man reached out to grab her. I slowly lowered my giant finger until its shadow completely engulfed him, quickly changing his theology. I told her I did not want their worship. Mara looked up, highly suspicious. "I am just a very confused guy who can help them with food. I can protect you from those men, but I am no god." She stared at the giant food mountain, the ash, and my massive face stretching across her sky. "That is a stupid thing to say from up there. Fair point." But it was still the truth. She touched the silver pendant. "Fine, here are my terms. Ceiling," she said. "I will translate, so my people can live. You do not order me or my brother to kneel, and you absolutely do not take my mother's silver. If you lie, I will make you regret it. She was barely an inch tall, starving, covered in smoke and mud, yet she was standing there threatening a giant who could literally flatten her entire house with one finger. Honestly, I believed her. Deal. She studied my face, then turned around to translate. Not everything, clearly. Some people looked relieved, others were just completely offended. Over by the forge, a broad-shouldered man glared up at me, basically memorizing my face for a future fight. That broad-shouldered guy was Owen Pike, and he absolutely refused to kneel too. Respect. Meanwhile, Mara kept the silver pendant without even asking for permission. Night settled over Ashwick. They buried poor Anwen right next to a burned cart because nobody had the strength to carry her any further. Mara ripped a black strap from a scorched basket and tied it tight around her wrist. Finn stood beside her, dry-eyed but shaking. They had no strength left for a proper procession. It took 4 people just to carry Anwen on a broken cottage door, and even that almost broke them. I turned my eyes away from the glass while Mara spoke over the grave. Whatever words she whispered belonged entirely to her people, not to the giant stranger who had showed up too late. As she tied that scorched strap around her wrist, Finn reached out for her hand, missing twice before she finally caught him. I kept my plastic cup over the 2 surviving collectors until Owen and 3 others could tie them up. Those prisoners had watched a massive glass dome fall, their boss pass out, and a mountain of food drop. Still, neither of them yielded. And here's my huge mistake. Terror is not faith, and that realization came way too late. I should have watched the borders. Turns out, one collector had actually escaped during the water splash. The exact guy carrying that dangerous needle stray point. He sneaked through a ditch while everyone was focused on the food, their grief, or me. I only noticed him when he reached the valley edge and stumbled toward a dark marker. I reached to grab him. Everything went blurry. My fingers slammed into cold glass where open air should have been. Past that boundary, he became a tiny streak of speed, disappearing into a terrain I could no longer touch. Godhood taught me its first harsh lesson right there. Power cuts deep. Later on, a captured clerk told us what message the runner sent from that exact spot. It was not a prayer, just 2 lines of code. Keeper found. Morning came quickly. By dawn, that massive golden nugget was still sitting in the village square like an absolute cliff, and half the villagers looked ready to starve politely right next to it. Here is the thing. Being a miracle worker is hard when everyone expects an instruction manual. Obviously, there were no instructions. Mara noticed me staring and gently touched her silver pendant. They will not take any more, she said quietly. The elders believe if we take too much, you will shut the sky down. I literally lowered this down so you guys could eat. When I told her that, they just asked if they prayed correctly. Down in the square, 2 elders guarded the food with tiny knives, while a woman tied a linen scrap around a crispy edge like a holy ribbon. Finn sat alone on a busted cartwheel, wrapping his arms around his knees and staring at the food like it had personally insulted him. Anwen's grave was barely 10 steps away. Nobody could bear to look at it. Mara wiped her blade on her sleeve and walked to the giant food. As the crowd whispered, she planted her boot on the golden crust, carved out a piece the size of a door, and hoisted it high. If the sky wants to complain, she told them, he can bring his complaints directly to me. I quickly chimed in for the record, this sky completely approves of vandalism if it keeps you all from starving. Mara's mouth twitched, her deep grief showing. She gave the first piece to Celeste, the stern woman who watched my earlier failure to save Wonan without once calling it a miracle. Celeste sniffed it, broke it into smaller pieces, and lined up the kids. Owen Pike, the massive blacksmith, stood right near the front with a heavy hammer tucked in his belt, keeping his eyes locked onto my reflection. Once again, he refused to bow. Now, the next big issue was water. Their old well was just a cracked stone ring filled with mud. By mid-morning, the crowd waiting at those dry stones had degenerated into a desperate scuffle of throwing elbows and cracked cups. Now, I had plenty of water upstairs. In fact, I had a whole city's plumbing. But how do you give water to inch-tall people without totally washing away their fragile stick houses? I searched my kitchen and found a small metal dipping cup left over from my old restaurant job. It was wide, clean, and empty. I filled it halfway, carried it carefully with both hands, and lowered it toward their dry mill yard. Get back. Mara screamed out before I could even warn them. Prepare yourselves, because this next part is absolutely wild. The cup slammed down into the mud with a heavy, metallic crash. To them, it was a massive, bright lake dropped right out of heaven. Owen stepped forward first. He tapped the metal wall with his hammer, grunted, and started stacking loose rocks so they could climb up. Celeste smacked a young boy's hand away before he could jump right in. Use cups, she barked, this is not a pool. But one stupid guy ignored her, scrambled up Owen's steps, leaned over, and fell face first into the water. The scream that echoed through the village was incredibly high and sharp. The roar of desperate people finding a miracle is almost deafening. Owen lunges forward, grabs the guy by his belt, and drags him out coughing. Coughing up muddy water and pride, the guy gets yelled at by Celeste with pure, exhausted fury. She has buried way too many fools. Mara looks right up at me. No more deep water unless we build stairs first, and I instantly agree. Owen glares up, hating that my help actually works. Then he goes right back to fixing those stairs. By late morning, Mara wants to search for 3 missing foragers. I just want her where I can see her. But I keep that to myself. I know better than to tell Mara Rook that she needs to stay glued to my screen. I ask what happens past the road marker. Touching her pendant, she just tells me to let her know. So she heads east with Finn trailing 10 paces behind, trying to act all casual while doing a pretty terrible job of it. Our map under my glass shifts. My table stays still, but the image moves, sliding Ashwick over and blurring the cottages. The ruined seed cart shrinks, as the path ahead sharpens around Mara. My throat tightens as I tell her she is carrying my window. Mara stops. Cold. She warns me not to say things that make it sound like I am putting a leash on her. She tells me men never mean it until they hear themselves. Fair point, so I ask for a heads up before she leaves my sight. I tell her we both deserve privacy, and both can be true. She looks at the sky, then nods. But as she turns, her pendant chain scrapes a sharp stone by her collarbone, and a strange little light flashes from the silver edge. She quickly shuts her fist over it. I ask what that was, but she claims it is nothing. I know she is lying. Since she just buried her mom, I let it slide. Then we spot smoke rising past the orchard. 36 hungry refugees emerge from the bare trees, clutching farm tools and kitchen knives sharpened into weapons. They have the cautious look of folks who have completely run out of friendly options. Honestly, they look even more exhausted than our villagers. 2 kids wear simple sacks with head holes. A woman holds a pitchfork, her hands shaking so hard the tines rattle. Their leader is a thin woman, with gray braids and a scar on her chin. Mara later tells me her name is Della Morn. Right now, she is just smart enough to point her blade at the pendant instead of at Mara. Della talks fast while Mara keeps her hands up. When Finn reaches for a rock, Mara barks his name without even turning around. Starving refugees surround them completely. From our side, Owen and 6 men come running out with wooden clubs, which is the absolute worst thing for this hungry standoff. Knowing things are about to devolve into a mindless bloodbath, I decide to solve human panic with a physical object. So I grab a giant meat strip off my plate and lower it right into the orchard. You won't believe what happens next. My hand slips. Too fast. The smell hits them first. Hot grease, salty meat, a literal feast from heaven. The starving crowd surges forward as one. Della screams, but Owen yells even louder. Kids are trampled underfoot. Mara looks up and screams to lift it, and I pull it up instantly. The meat rises back into the sky while sobbing. Desperate people claw at the empty air. A little girl sits crying in the mud with a scraped lip, completely terrified because I dangled salvation like bread before pigeons. Mara stands between the angry factions with her broken blade in one hand and the magic pendant in the other. Nobody eats until everyone steps off the kids. The orchard drops dead silent. It is so quiet, I can actually hear my apartment refrigerator hum in the background. Celeste runs up panting, takes one look at the hurt little girl, and immediately points at Della, Owen, and Mara. 3 leaders. No formal votes, just starving people staring at each other with blades still drawn. Mara walks over, untying Anwin's charred basket strap from her wrist. Placing it on a flat rock between Della and Owen, she quietly says her mother died beside their first food. She won't have kids trampled over this one. Owen's jaw tightens, muttering that Ashwick's food must feed their own first. Della lets out a harsh, dry laugh, saying Ashwick can feast while they watch their own babies lick bark. Owen steps forward. Mara taps her broken blade flat against his chest, not hard enough to hurt, but definitely enough to insult him. Children eat first, she demands. Ashwick kids, orchard kids, then the sick, and finally anyone standing guard. They will have 1 guard from each side, and anyone who grabs gets absolutely nothing. Della looks up at the floating meat. Mara adds that nobody kneels, because food is not rent. That line was actually mine. Crouching by the hurt girl, Celeste mutters without looking up that if anyone fights, she treats the child first and fighters last. Cold, unethical, and highly effective. Della lowers her weapon first. Owen lowers his heavy club after a tense moment of pure, mutual hatred. I carefully lower the giant meat strip again, setting it down on a bare patch of soil, as if the dirt itself were made of fragile glass. Mara slices the food into tiny crumbs while Della and Owen watch her every single move. Children stepped forward in pairs. This truce was ugly. Nobody sang. No one hugged. Several adults looked ready to kill if the supply count was off. Still, food and water moved. Nobody got trampled. I almost yelled at them to stop touching the clean food with dirty hands. But looking at Mara standing there covered in soot, my advice would just sound like terrifying thunder. A poorly timed god is just another disaster. So I shut up and watched her work from above like background furniture. You have to realize this is the brutal difference between a miracle and an actual working system. A system meant Mara staring down armed thugs while Celeste weaponized her medical skills, while I desperately tried to avoid triggering some accidental natural disaster. By afternoon, I had to run across town because some pizza place freezer was screaming its final mechanical prayer. Skipping it meant zero pay. Turns out godhood does not actually cover my rent. I only planned to be gone 20 minutes, dragging myself down those stairs. But it took 2 hours because the owner used duct tape on the fan belt. My phone buzzed twice. Missed call from Nena Alvarez. I stared at her name until the screen went black. Nina knew my lying voice. Old partners have a way of collecting that exact evidence. I called her back from the alley behind the pizza place. "You alive, Mercer?" she asked. "Mostly" is not exactly a medical category. It is in my budget. After a pause, she noted I missed Friday's check at Mercy Grill. "That is not like you." I stared up at my apartment window across town. Ridiculous, I know. I lied about getting trapped on some appliance repair job. Liar. Eat food, sleep, and if you are hurt, do not patch your wounds with electrical tape again. I hung up before she could pry any deeper. Walking back, I bought the absolute cheapest survival essentials I could physically carry. Bottled water, dry crackers, instant rice, applesauce, alcohol, and gloves. No grand divine shopping spree here. Just a stressed guy with rent due, holding cheap groceries, and wondering how many lives fit inside $27. When I returned, Finn was lingering near the pendant. He tapped it cautiously, like the metal might suddenly bite him back. "Why were you late?" he demanded. Standing right behind him, Mara froze instantly. I knew what he meant. He was talking about Anwin, about being too late to save her. It is the classic curse of gods arriving after the grave is already dug. Admitting I did not know only made things worse. His face twisted, spitting that my ignorance somehow made it better. "If he is not some divine being, he can answer us," Finn yelled. I could have given him a grand speech, but instead, I just admitted I was late. She still died. The silver pendant held our heavy silence. Mara looked up, and I saw something deep in her eyes that I had absolutely no idea how to handle. It was not forgiveness or trust, just raw, ugly recognition. She told Finn not to worship me, but also not to lie about what I did. Shaking her off, the boy headed back toward the rations. Nightfall brought a freezing chill and even more desperate souls crowding around the edge of the orchard. With Della's 36 refugees officially joined, Ashwick felt less like a safe haven and more like a lit match dropped on dry straw. Every single eye watched every tiny crumb, and just when you think things might settle, this creepy black feather rider appears alone on a painfully thin horse. Draped in a dark cloak, he wore a single black feather hanging right at his throat. Stopping right outside the square, he raised his hands and bellowed. Mara grasped the pendant, letting the rider's booming words echo directly through her mouth. Under command of Marshal Corin Voss, Warden of the Bracken March, hand over Mara Rook and the Silver Witness within 3 days. If she stays hidden, 7 neighboring settlements will burn to ashes as punishment. And if the heavens try to interfere, your children will be taken first. Chaos erupted, as Della's refugees instantly backed away from Mara. Owen gripped his hammer. Celeste instantly started counting the children by instinct. Finn stared at his sister, then looked at me, and I saw the exact second they realized my presence didn't stop the threat. It just gave their doom a target. Yet Mara stood frozen. I leaned in close, letting my massive shadow swallow the sky, and swore no one would take her. She slowly looked up at me. She whispered that it sounded like a promise, and I agreed, but she warned me promises can become cages. Suddenly, Finn collapsed, throwing up in the mud. 2 other children collapsed right after him. Celeste dropped to her knees as Mara spun around, her silver pendant flashing. Over on the edge of the square, the leftover food lay rotting, its exposed side turning dark as the salty smell curdled into sour decay. For a moment, I just stared at the decay, stupidly hoping it was a mistake. Then Celeste glared up at Mara and barked out a single word. Mara translated, her voice flat. "Quarantine." Finn began choking for air the second she said it, his chest rattling violently like an engine trying to start with no fuel left in the line. He lay huddled on a dirty mat next to the other sick children, his lips cracked and skin turning ghostly gray under the dim candlelight. Mara is kneeling so close, her shadow completely covers his face, while desperate villagers scream for a miracle. "Heal him. Take the sickness away. Command the disease to leave. The words come through Mara in broken pieces as she grips her pendant with one hand and Finn's wrist with the other. Her voice is completely flat. Somehow, that dead quiet is scarier than any scream. Celeste shoves 3 praying women right out of the doorway. Back off if your fate has clean hands, maybe it will help. If not, let it wait outside. Mara translates only the crucial parts. Stop ruining the air, she warns. I hold my phone flashlight in one hand, gripping a clean strip of a t-shirt in the other. My right palm is still stained with Onwin's ugly purple bruise. Apparently, even fantasy worlds keep receipts. Show me his breathing, I demand. Mara leans in, counting his breaths and copying the pattern. It is too fast, then shallow. Finn flinches from my light and dry heaves. I had literally fed starving kids salty, fried meat after days of eating tree bark, mud, and panic, leaving the meat exposed like a complete fool, thinking I was some savior. It is no curse, I tell them. Dehydration, spoiled food, way too much grease and salt, and right here, Mara's eyes slowly lock onto mine. She says my miracle rotted. Yes. The truth tastes worse than that rancid meat smells, and the crowd instantly turns on me. One mother asks if I am punishing them, while Della wonders if Ashwick poisoned the children at the orchard. Owen says absolutely nothing. He just glares at my hand, measuring exactly where to chop it off if he has to. Celeste cuts through the noise. No more meat, boil the local water if there is fuel, and only drink rainwater from the steps. Wash your hands before eating. Watch the kids in pairs. Anyone hiding sick symptoms will answer to her, not to heaven. Celeste doesn't wait for my guilt to settle. She points a finger at the remaining food and barks out another sharp order. Mara translates, throw all the meat away now. A villager screams back that a holy gift cannot be thrown out. Celeste spins on him, clutching a dirty rag with medicine and mud splattered all over her sleeves. Then eat it yourself next to the graves, she snaps, and keep the kids out of your theology. Mara delivers every bitter word. I mix a weak rehydration cure in a small plastic cap, using bottled water and a sugar packet from my glove box. It is not holy magic. This is just the kind of ugly, desperate improvisation you do when real doctors are miles away and a child is actively dying. The real challenge is the dose. A single drop from my world could choke this kid if I make a mistake. I touch a clean straw to the liquid, letting a tiny droplet cling to the tip before lowering it down. Mara holds Finn's head steady. Celeste guides the drop to his parched lips with a piece of clay. Wait, she commands, and we wait in silence. Finn finally swallows. My lungs remember how to breathe again. We repeat the process over and over under Celeste's strict watch. When another desperate mother tries to grab the bottle, Owen Pike blocks her path without even glancing at me for approval. Good. Finally, these people are starting to learn some survival instincts. Outside, Owen and 2 women drag the rotting meat to the ash pit. The villagers cry as if a saint is burning. Celeste watches it blacken, whispering that if heaven rots, we burn heaven down too. Earlier, I might have cracked a joke. Not this time. By dawn, Finn's shallow breathing finally begins to steady. The other 2 sick kids stop throwing up. No one is okay is a luxury they lost long ago, but the disaster steps back 1 inch. I grip the edge of the table. Tell them I did this, I say. Mara looks up in shock. The illness. I repeat. Feeding them wrong, storing it wrong, it is all on me. Mara translates everything, and the room suddenly gets freezing cold. Some look betrayed. Others seem glad that Blamia finally has a body. Owen's glare tightens, but he stops whispering that Celeste is faithless. Celeste just nods to her. Clean water matters more than confessions, but honesty is a start. And right on cue, the real trouble arrives. By sunrise, Captain Brandsable arrives at the village border, with 12 Black Banner soldiers and 8 tied-up prisoners from the outer farms. He doesn't charge in screaming. Honestly, that would have been so much easier to hate. Instead, he marches in upright, neat, and calm, his boots perfectly clean, while we are covered in mud. Clean monsters like that always make me nervous. A filthy thug shows you his worst right away. A neat one makes you wait for the stab. Around him, the prisoners are bound in a loose circle. 6 adults, an elder, and a little girl around Finn's age. Sable drives a spear into the dirt, its polished tip gleaming under the morning sun. No cheap village iron here. It looks like a giant sewing needle sharpened into a deadly weapon for a praying tyrant. Mara grips her pendant as Sable's cold, harsh voice flows right through her. Under the authority of Marshal Voss, surrender Mara Rook and the Silver Witness. Let the fake sky watch, but it must not interfere. Owen raises his heavy hammer, but Mara grabs his wrist, whispering no. Sable just stares up at the empty sky, smiling at the completely wrong place. The captain couldn't see my face, which was the first big advantage I had. He drew his blade and sliced open an empty grain sack right at the old man's feet. Gray dust spilled out. "Your lord taught you that word," Mara called out. Sable's gaze shifted toward her voice, completely ignoring mine. "My lord teaches the march useful words, like observer, witness, or edge." He smiled as the villagers crossed themselves in fear. "Pure, cheap cruelty, unless you are starving." Then, he tapped his blade against the rope circle for all of them to see. My fingers curled around the brass rim. I could have dropped a cup, or dropped another on the road, but I risked destroying the wrong spot because of Sable's placement of those 8 hostages. Mara sensed my thoughts from below. "Don't," she warned. "I know. Just saying it before you forget." "Fair enough. Unpleasant, but necessary." Suddenly, a man in a patched brown coat slipped out from behind the refugees, while everyone watched Sable. Now who is this guy? He is older, lean, with a sketchy gambler's smile and a terrible beard. His eyes calculated the exits before looking at any faces. He bowed to Mara as if apologizing for some future crime. Rafe whispered to her. "If everyone is done admiring the captain's posture," he says, "I know a drainage path behind the old dye house." Mara pressed her knife against his coat seam so fast I almost missed it. "Why?" she asked. "Because I've made some bad career choices." "Try again." "I used to run supply routes before Voss starved these roads." Hearing this, Owen took a step forward. "Black Banner." Rafe's smile faded. "Former," he admitted, which is easily the ugliest word in that sentence. Pointing with 2 fingers, he kept still under Mara's blade. "The rope circle has 3 lookouts on the roofs and 1 blind spot behind that collapsed tannery wall." He knew exactly where they'd be watching because he added, "Soldiers serving Sable trust straight roads and clear orders." I never trusted him, and Mara didn't either. But we've got 8 hostages surrounded by spears, and trust is a luxury only the rich can afford right now. I grabbed some wax dental floss from my drawer, tied it to a bent tack, and lowered it down between the chimney and a broken roof beam. To me, it was just a simple thread. To Mara's scouts, it became a glowing white road through the sky. 3 villagers hooked themselves onto the line with bent nails, sliding over the alley, silent as spiders. Rafe ignored the miracle and watched the guards. That bothered me. "Why are their lance tips shining?" I asked, and Mara relayed it. Looking at the spear, his playful charm vanished for a second. "Because someone wants the locals to think Voss owns Saint Steel." He offered no further explanation. Meanwhile, the scouts reached the back of the rope circle just as Sable raised his hand. I held my phone next to some foil packaging, a totally ridiculous setup. My divine intervention cost exactly $7 and some lint. "Mara," I whispered, and she nodded when I prepped the flash. Then she yelled to the scouts so loudly that the nearest soldier turned around. "Eli Mercer," she yelled. "There goes my real name." I triggered the flash, and blinding white light exploded across the road. For a brief second, everyone below turned into dark silhouettes stamped against smoke. Honestly, I blinded myself too, because I guess I love dealing with consequences. Mara didn't miss a beat. She sliced the first rope while the roof scouts dropped behind the guards to cut the others. Owen charged low, ignoring Sable to rush the guard standing closest to the old man. He took a shallow slash to the thigh but kept moving. That told me everything I needed to know about Owen Pike, and honestly, it was pretty annoying. 6 hostages broke free before Sable could even react. Mara's sleeve brushed against Owen's bleeding leg as he stumbled back. A tiny smear of blood from his scrape touched her pendant chain, making the silver flare with a warmth that made her flinch. She hid her shock by yelling at him to stop bleeding on her boots. I noticed the reaction, but didn't understand it. "Down," Sable barked. His men didn't aim for the sky. They pointed their weapons right at the 2 remaining hostages, because Sable wasn't testing my physical strength. He wanted to see if power made me stupid. Well, watch this, because I had one trick left that wouldn't crush anyone. Under my workbench was a heavy shop magnet strong enough to destroy a cheap watch and ruin every screwdriver in the room. Using both hands, I slid the magnet directly under the active section of the table. For a second, dead silence. Then, the Saint Steel flew. Spear tips ripped sideways. Daggers leaped from their sheaths, and a metal helmet buckle tore loose, smacking a guard in the face. The mountain of weapons crashed onto the dirt road with a deafening sound like angry bells. Soldiers panicked, hostages scrambled, and Mara used the chaos to slam her shoulder directly into Sable's knees. He crashed down, rolled over, and stood back up with a split lip and absolute fury in his eyes. Meanwhile, Owen freed the last 2 hostages. I imagine Sable pinned under glass like a trapped insect, saved for later. He saw the look in Mara's eyes and knew he was done. Desperate, he grabbed one of his own stumbling soldiers by the collar, throwing him straight onto the pile of magnetized metal. The guy crashes hard into a pile of steel. Sable slices off his dark cloak, throws it over the metal, and crawls back through the mud and chaos. Mia screams. I reach out. Sable drags himself past that weird invisible barrier that swallowed the first collector. My fingertips hit nothing but freezing resistance. The steel pole vanishes right at the border. He spots it immediately. Standing safely out of reach, Sable gasps for air, touching his bleeding lip. He bows. Measuring, not worshipping. I hate him instantly. Celeste wraps a lance tip in cloth, warning everyone not to touch it bare. She jokes that if it is holy, it can handle being stored like evidence. Her joke is terrible, but I needed that. At least the prisoners are alive. Owen's torn thigh is bandaged, and Finn is resting in the shelter. For 1 hour, our village believes we finally got a clean win. Even I almost believed we were safe. But trust me, reality always hits hard. A northern courier staggers in, carrying a dark warning tied to his wrist. His right hand is wrapped so tight that only the tips of 2 fingers are visible. Celeste dashes over before Mara can even translate his first word. The man refuses water until his message is delivered. He rasps out that Marshal Voss has corrected Elder Wren of Low Barrow for spreading silver rumors. The elder was executed on the chain as a warning. Nobody speaks. Then, the courier raises his bandaged hand right toward my reflection. He tells me to let Eli Mercer know he knows where heaven ends. My space goes dead silent. Below us, Mara looks at Rafe. Rafe, a guy who usually smiles through blades, starvation, and running rooftops, freezes up entirely. He stares at the black cord like it is tightening around his own neck. Rafe whispers something quiet, and Mara catches it. Her expression shifts just a fraction. She tells me later it was definitely no prayer. It was a secret route code, used when a message is worth more than the scout. Mara saw it, and I saw her react. But the terrifying truth I realized too late is that Voss did not actually lose today. He was just testing us, learning the exact limits of my power. He knows my name, and where my reach ends. Mara decides our silver treasure is too dangerous to keep here. The silver pendant is a piece of heaven that every starving soul desires, and every Black Banner hunter wants to claim. Mara stands at the eastern fence beside Rafe Calder. They have 4 scouts, meager rations, and Owen complaining from a stool because Celeste banned him from walking on his injured leg. Owen warns her not to go, but Mara just tightens the burned strap on her wrist. She fires back that she will draw Voss away by taking his actual target. A brilliant, highly dangerous plan. When Owen tries to stand, Celeste pins his bandage down, warning him she will reopen the wound herself. He sits. I hate everything about this plan. Voss and Sable already know my tricks. From light to magnetic restraint. Their enemy is packing polished steel weapons that do not belong in a ragged, starving medieval army. Yet Mara wants to walk the silver right down the black road, straight into Voss's next trap, surrounded by grain wagons and hostages. I beg to send backup. She touches her pendant, warning that more people only make noise. So I order her to stay close, but it is really just my sleepless anxiety talking. She gives me a faint smile and walks away. Soon, the village of Ashwick starts blurring in the distance. The local lake shrinks to a silver dot, the burned cart, the grave, and the shelters all fade away. Everything I want to protect slowly vanishes behind Mara's shoulder, and the dangerous, desolate road ahead comes into sharp focus. For the first time, Ashwick could burn to the ground and I would not even know. You can tell Rafe immediately senses my rising dread. Of course he does. Killers like him sense fear instantly. He grins and tells me there is some good news. If this fails, at least you won't have to watch. Mara lightly taps the flat of her blade against his arm. He preaches usefulness over comfort. But I just want clear leadership as he guides them off the main path. They pass a trail marker painted black on one side and scraped clean on the other, which locals always ignore. Mara mentions that Anwen used an old goat path nearby, but Rafe already knows the turn before she says it. Her pendant warms slightly as they walk past. It is not burning hot, just warm like a coin under the sun. Gripping the silver piece, she looks up. I ask if she felt it, and she tells me to mind my own business. The enemy checkpoint looks like a refugee camp to the untrained eye, but I have seen enough to know better. Real survivors huddle together, protecting their kids and food. But here, the wagons are parked in perfect, orderly squares. Their boots face the exact same direction, cooking fires are too clean, and one sentinel is pretending to limp on the wrong leg. Wraith crouched on a scrub bridge, pointing. 3 archers behind the oak, and 2 under the broken wagon. That woman by the pot has soldier boots. Mara's eyes never leave the camp. You know this because you ran routes, but I know it because sable men think straight lines are a total virtue. That is not an answer, just a pretty refusal. She looks at him as Rafe's soft smile makes it somehow worse. I wore the black boots. I scouted the cold roads, carried their messages, and lied to myself that starving under a uniform was somehow noble. Owen is not here, so Mara has to handle this heavy emotional work herself. How much did you carry for Voss? Enough that if I told you now, you would throw me straight into a ditch. Sounds like another pretty refusal. It is the best I have got. Mara holds his gaze. One useful lie, she warns. Then I cut the next one out. Rafif bows, completely silent. A generous contract indeed, but wait, look below. A group in black cloaks drags 3 bound kids into the road hollow. Behind them, 2 more figures force a woman down to her knees. From above, it looks like sable soldiers setting up another execution rope. My hand reaches for my parts tray instantly. The steel washer is huge to them, heavy enough to bend a heavy cart axle. I raise the steel, ready to drop it. But Mara's scream cuts through the pendant stop. I freeze. The giant washer hangs there, shaking in my fingers, its dark shadow swallowing everyone below. Mara sprints down the muddy ridge, sliding as she grabs a child. She tears at the soldier's black cloak. Underneath is just a starving woman, bruises on her face and a brutal rope mark around her neck. This soldier is just a mother forced into costume, the rest are trembling civilians, barely holding those ropes. She is not being executed, she is only whispering. Please make it look real. Hidden archers rise from the ditch, bows drawn. I hold the washer up until my wrist burns. An officer behind the wagon hisses, hold until they cross the patron's blind line. Those words sound way too polished. Mara looks up at me once, and I get the message not yet. So I do nothing. Doing nothing while arrows aim at her is a disgusting form of personal growth. Rafe moves first. He warns that if they stage this play, they are guarding something pretty ugly. He leads Mara under the broken wagon as decoys scatter. Arrows snap into the dirt. One scout takes an arrow through his sleeve and keeps crawling. The officer orders archers to shoot anyone not wearing black. Voss does not just use innocents as shields, he uses them as disposable camouflage. Mara slides under the nearest ration wagon, finding a plank that does not match the rest of the floor. Wraith kneels by the wheel, shouting so the guards hear. Beautiful theft, he mocks. Very clean. Empty wagons on top, full bellies underneath. Does Voss know you kept this stash for yourselves? The officer turns. It is enough time. Mara jams her knife into the seam, cracking the boards. And just like that, grain spills into the mud like a broken hourglass. Look at how the camp shifts. Starving people notice grain faster than arrows. Refugees begin crawling toward it. Guards stare at the hidden food. A young archer lowers his bow as his own daughter reaches for the fallen grain. The officer screams, "Fire on the thieves!" But absolutely nobody moves. He shoots the young archer through the shoulder, ending the debate. The man's daughter screams, dropping beside him. Other guards hesitate, caught between their harsh training and a very real hunger that has names and faces. I cannot fix this complicated mess with a magnet, so I drop down proof. One wrapped, dry ration bar lands on the empty road. It lands near nobody, but close enough for every starving person to smell sweet oats through the wrapper. Then I pull my hand back. No loud speech, no divine drama. Having learned a few hard things, I know they apparently hurt. Mara does not eat first. Since Owen's people are not here, she breaks off a tiny piece and places it in the fallen archer's daughter's hand. The girl stares at the food. Nearby, a guard watches his captain's arrow pin the father's shoulder to the wagon. Then he turns his bow, right at the officer. Other guards instantly follow. The officer tries fake courtesy first, that is how you know he is losing. Stand down, the warden will correct. One clean shot from the archer's brother pinned the officer's coat to a wagon wheel. Right after that, taking the checkpoint became pure work. Nothing about this was clean. Desperate people fought over spilled grain. And Della's scouts had to physically tackle thieves trying to steal entire sacks. Mia shoved the guard's daughter onto a wagon, forcing the hostile crowd to look at her while splitting the first bag. Rafe slid between the traitor guards like a smooth-talking salesman of bad choices, twisting their terror into bargains like food for their hungry kids, or guaranteed safety for anyone helping haul the wagons, and absolutely zero mercy for anyone who fired again. I stayed pretty quiet, realizing leadership is way more effective when you stop shouting just to be heard. By early afternoon, Mara secured 3 whole grain wagons. We also got 9 defectors, dozens of refugees, and 1 tied-up officer glaring from his own wagon, angry and completely useless now. Rafe easily could have slipped away with a grain cart, but he stayed. I noticed that. Of course, I only trusted him as far as I could throw him. We started heading home under a gloomy, tin-colored sky. For a second, it felt like we actually won. But then, a heavy silence hit the road. No birds near the trees, no cooking smoke from Ashwick, and no sound from Owen's forge. Rafe lost his smile, and Mia started running. Behind her, the heavy wagons creaked, packed with food and newcomers who still had not earned a shred of trust. My perspective shifted through the pendant. I tried forcing my vision ahead, like leaning forward in a slow car, but it did nothing. I told Mara I saw it and urged her to run ahead, but she just snapped her head up. "Do not waste the morning learning patience just to forget it now," she warned as dark smoke rose. My hands gripped the table so hard the brass edge bit into my palms. "I should be there with them." "You are here," she replied. Her voice was cold and blunt, but somehow, that actually helped me focus. A few steps later, she called me Eli. It was the first time she used my name without yelling, and I hated that it happened while running toward fire. The village came back into view at sunset. Thankfully, Ashwick was not completely leveled to the ground. Honestly, this was worse. Total ruin is simple, but this was targeted. 3 cottages were burned to ash. The shelter roof was torn open, and our water source lay ruined, leaking into the mud and soot. Near the well, 2 gray shawls covered those who did not survive. Finn sat there, pale and utterly exhausted, too weak to stand but way too angry to cry. Owen limped over to Mara before the wagons even stopped, his shoulder bandage bleeding heavily once more. Clutching his hammer, he pointed aggressively at Rafe, accusing Mara of leaving them behind. Mara could only stare at the dead bodies. Owen spat that she left for grain while the enemy attacked. His bitter words cut deep because they were partially true. A soot-covered woman stepped up to explain what went down. Several refugee families arrived, pretending to escape a raid, and a woodcutter stupidly let his guard down. He opened the gates before Owen could stop him. But they were not refugees, they were decoys who quickly fled. They killed 2 of our guards, burned homes, spilled our water, and splashed black tar everywhere before escaping into the woods. "Look at this mess." A fresh, shiny black handprint was painted right across the stones at the village entrance. Underneath that mark, they carved a threatening message in the exact same secret code that freaked Rafe out earlier. Rafe stared at the symbol like it personally threatened him, and Mia caught his reaction immediately. I wanted blood. I wanted to use every supernatural relic in my room to hunt them down. Payback for those bodies by the well was all I wanted, but Maya completely avoided my gaze. Instead, she looked at the burning homes, the wounded, and the helpless survivors who had trusted Elaine to keep them safe. Then she declared we are leaving, making Owen blow up, but she coldly replied that Ashwick is already gone. Celeste stepped out of the shelter with soot and medical stains covering her sleeves. Owen demanded to know where they could go, and Celeste suggested the quarry 2 miles west. Mara nodded in agreement. We had to move fast before Voss came back. Honestly, nobody was celebrating the stolen grain anymore. The supplies sat in the dirt like a sick joke, proving we could steal from Voss, but he could still destroy us. I stared at the dark handprint, our stolen food, Finn's traumatized face, and the spot where we lost Anwin. The morning gave us stolen supplies, but the evening stole our home. If we wait until dawn, Voss will take our lives. Before this, my entire defense budget was just a $9 metal strainer hanging over my sink. I wish that was some funny joke, but it was all I had. Down below, the village smelled like wet ash and fresh graves. Mia had the survivors packing immediately. No time for grieving. It sounded pretty cruel until you saw that black handprint drying on the road. Voss knew exactly where we were. A traitor had marked us, meaning men with torches were coming. I wanted to hunt them, but Mara wanted shovels. 2 bodies lay under Celeste's blankets near the wrecked cart. Finn sat nearby, sick, wrapped up, and almost too angry to even shake. Owen limped through the smoking ruins, gripping his heavy hammer while blood seeped right through his leg bandage. We bury them, and then we move, Mara said. Owen spun on her. Running just makes things easier for Voss. Staying makes it short, Owen growled. This is Ashwick. Mara stared at the black handprint on the road. Her voice went cold as she said walls are not memories. Nobody liked that, and watching from above, I could not complain. The woodcutter's name was Jory Pell. At first, people whispered it like an uneasy question. Jory opened the south lane. Jory said he knew the way. Then he vanished before the fire caught. Hearing his name made Owen's grip tighten around his hammer. Deal with it later, Mara muttered. Owen spat. Later is what cowards call never, he barked. I leaned in. She is right. Mara looked up, completely shocked. If Voss spots that mark before you move, I warned, I can win any argument over a grave. That bought us silence. Silence was cheaper. And still useful. They buried them under the apple stump. No time to carry them. No strength to pretend ceremony made loss lighter. Maya took blankets from the trader's empty cottage to use as shrouds. Nobody argued. Finn tried to stand when the first body went down, but collapsed, cursing softly. Celeste put a hand on his shoulder. He angrily shoved her away, then leaned back against her anyway. That was Ashwick now. hatred and desperate need, sharing a single blanket because they had nothing else left. At dawn, the survivors marched. News of our grain revolt had already outrun us. Fleeing families from marked farms joined our desperate column until we were over 300 strong. This exodus was messy. Broken carts, sick people wrapped in grain sacks, kids holding giant bowls, and nervous military defectors watched closely by our men. 3 heavy grain wagons creaked in the center. Celeste refused to abandon 2 fever patients. Owen grunted they slow us. Celeste dumped a patient into his arms. Then be faster, she snapped. He carried her. Up front, Rafe scouted. Twice, Rafe waved us off the main road before dark shapes crossed the distant fields. They were too far to hit, but close enough to remind us Voss was watching, and then, nature decided to join the fight. Heavy rain had carved the path into a brown, muddy mouth. The lead cart nearly flipped, children screaming underneath. I grabbed my massive metal spatula from the tool bucket, the giant steel scraper I used for greasy griddles, and lowered it flat across the massive gap. Flat, Mara barked. Ground flat is different, she was annoyingly right. I held the handle while Owen and the defectors braced it. Slowly, the carts crossed, one by one. Halfway through, a bleeding driver slipped, brushing his raw chin right against my bare thumb holding the sharp edge. Sudden, blinding pain erupted. It was a deep, burning ache, like a hot bruise pressing into an old wound. I almost flinched. Finn saw. Pale under his blanket in the third cart, Finn croaked that Sailing's hand was shaking, then cross before it drops, Mara snapped. She had a wonderful bedside manner, clearly. Everyone crossed safely, but the heavy grain wagons made survival slow and difficult. Every stuck wheel started an argument over whose child would eat tomorrow. Mia put Della at the back, Owen near the front, and kept Rafe far from the coin pouch. Good call. My hand looked pretty bad by the time the jagged slate quarry opened below us, a rainy bowl of gray stone. Defensible, if your only benchmark was being harder to murder than a burned village. I looked at my kitchen sink. My metal colander hung there, looking bizarrely, wholly if you had recently been hit on the head. Round, stainless steel. I lifted it, feeling the removable rim click under my thumb. A cheap spring clamp snapped hard against my nail. I bought it to keep pasta from escaping, but right now, this cheap kitchen tool was their only hope. Mara cleared the quarry floor first, shoving everyone back until the last cartwheel was outside the massive shadow. I used a spoon to push away 2 loose boulders. Down there, that spoon looked like a giant plow blade. I moved carefully because one wrong nudge could crush a family. Then, the massive iron nest descended. It settled over the quarry ledge with a sound like a buried bell. The rim struck stone, and rain hit the steel, shattering into silver mist. Every single hole in that giant metal bowl became a makeshift window, a tiny slit where scared kids could watch me without being exposed. 3 breaths of dead silence. Then Finn mumbled it was a cooking helmet for some sleeping giant. A nervous laugh rippled through the cold quarry. It was ragged, almost pathetic, but I needed that moment more than anyone. Owen just wiped rain from his beard. Some called it Mercer's fist. Mara rejected Iron Dome, so what then? Mara looked over the huddled refugees, the carts, the wounded children, and the grain. She called it the Iron Nest, and that name stuck. People poked the gaps with knives, driven by the desperate hope that usually gets you killed. One kid almost climbed out before Owen grabbed his ankle. A woman kissed the metal rim, blushing when Mara caught her. Meanwhile, the defectors loitered near the entry until Della forced them to haul heavy stones. That worked wonders. Nothing ruins an enemy's mysterious vibe faster than watching him lug heavy rocks through the miserable freezing rain. A giant bowl isn't a fortress just because it landed with a massive crash. The very first wind gust sprayed freezing rain inside, soaking Celeste's sick patients. Plus, the uneven stone floor left massive gaps under the metal rim. Thick smoke from cooking fires trapped itself inside, choking everyone. Instantly, 2 families began screaming over the driest spot before even unpacking their sleeping rolls. I offered to plug the holes, but Mara just touched her pendant and looked up slowly. She scoffed, asking if I'd plug them with my good intentions. We needed air, arrow slits, and a clear view to spot danger before it reached us. Owen, still limping, quickly built shutters from shattered carts. Celeste grabbed the driest alcove for her clinic, warning anyone who dared store grain near her patients. Suddenly she froze, staring at a hooked mark on Mara's silver. She muttered that she'd seen that symbol inside a hidden convent, promising details once the freezing stopped, before heading back to her sick patients. Wraith put the 9 defectors on outer watch with Ashwick troops right behind them. Trust is great, but supervision is better. Nobody dared to argue with those orders. Mara quietly walked along the perimeter, assigning families to their designated spots in the shelter. Fighters guarded the road, Kids stayed far from the entrance. She set up screens before anyone could complain about privacy. A cynical man asked if sleeping under our roof required kneeling. I answered quickly before Mara could lose her temper and insult him. I told him flatly that safety has no price, and nobody kneels here. Mara stared at me through the rain-streaked glass, and whispered, "Good." And get this, by dusk, the smoky iron nest was freezing, ugly, but very much alive. Then, Mercy arrived. 3 wagons covered in white cloth rolled down from the north road. They were pulled by guys far too thin to be soldiers, yet way too clean to be refugees. Those wagons held fresh loaves stamped with a terrifying black sun symbol, alongside heavy jugs of cheap ale sealed tight with dark wax. The driver announced this as Warden Voss's mercy rations. Nobody cheered, yet absolute hunger made everyone lean forward. Suddenly, a little boy slipped from his mother and took a quick bite before Celeste could stop him. He chewed twice, blinked, and collapsed into the mud. The entire quarry fell dead silent. Celeste dashed over first, prying his mouth open to smell the bread before violently slapping the loaf right out of the mother's hand. "Bitter poison," she yelled. "Rinse his mouth, nobody swallow." Right then, one driver bolted. Owen cracked his knees with a heavy wooden handle. Meanwhile, I was already lunging toward those suspicious wagons. Absolute fury makes violent solutions look pretty simple, but Mara quickly stepped in front of me, pointing out that they drugged a kid just to hide real refugees inside. She was right again. Hidden beneath that white cloth, terrified women and elderly folks were packed shoulder to shoulder, probably told we'd butcher them if they made a sound. I pulled my hand back so slowly that my arm literally ached. Celeste forced the boy to spit, rinse, and breathe until his eyes finally focused again. He wasn't healed, but he was alive. The captured driver spat curses, but Celeste completely ignored him. She scoffed that any god relying on poisoned bread is unqualified. Mara translated it loudly, recognizing the importance of that black sun stamp. Celeste carefully cut the dark symbol from the crust and tucked it right next to Sable's stolen spear tip, refusing to falsely call it official evidence. She hated words that made people feel safer than the harsh facts allowed. Hearing the children weeping, another driver cracked before Owen even laid a hand on him, confessing their master wanted the keeper alive while staring at Mara's necklace. Everyone else just had to be kept quiet. Then, he broke down sobbing, as if the horror of his own words finally registered. The final driver buckled under Owen's terrifying glare, pointing across our camp to expose a traitor inside Ashwick's own ranks, whispering the name Jory Pell. He accepted a black sun coin. That traitorous name swept through the camp like wildfire finding dry oil. Before night fell, we dragged Jory Pell out from under a dirty grain tarp. He was a scrawny coward with sawdust in his hair, stammering out desperate excuses. His 2 young sons clung to his coat until Owen gently pulled them off. Jory looked at me, hoping the gods might listen to his pathetic explanations. Big mistake. Mara pulled a burnt strap from her wrist and bound his hands tightly, offering zero mercy. Then she marched him out. Mara didn't care about formal trials, political councils, or fancy speeches meant only for people who still had safe roofs. Mara forced him to walk down the center of Iron Nest, while every family he betrayed yelled out their agonizing losses. Lysa's home, my brother, our water, my mother's blankets, 2 centuries. Jory kept crying out about his sons. They were his only reason and his excuse. Voss already had their names and cords ready. He thought opening one lane would make them spare his family. Owen raised his heavy hammer, but Mara never flinched. Her voice cut clean through the nest. If we strike him down, his sons only learn that fear works until someone stronger arrives. He sold us. And he does not get to buy his way back with cheap tears. She snatched the black sun coin from his belt, grabbed his knife and boots, and handed him just 1 day's worth of bread. Then she carved a brutal message into a scrap wood board and shoved it against his chest. "No child is currency," she told him. "Carry that to Voss, or run forever." Jory looked up at me again. I could have ended him with 1 finger. Every angry part of me wanted that easy simplicity. Instead, I stayed completely silent and let Mara's harsh mercy sting worse. They dragged him out along the road under heavily armed guard. No one slept after that. Near midnight, Rafe finally found the cords. Dozens of dark, knotted cords were hidden under wagon axles, tucked inside bread crates, and looped around refugee carts that had just rolled in. Every cord had chilling knots, small ones, pairs, and a long one at the end. Rafe's face went completely pale, and Mara slowly held one up. "Is this some kind of message?" "No." Rafe said no games or smiles here, just a scheduled pickup route. He looked at Finn before answering. Scouts rushed back within the hour. Chilling cords had already appeared beyond the quarry. 1 knot meant babies, 2 was for walking toddlers, and a long end meant they were old enough to haul heavy loads. Suddenly, an escaped courier collapsed into Iron Nest. He had a deep gash on his cheek and was caked in thick, Wet mud. He gasped that Voss had ordered every single child from 7 villages rounded up at Gallows Field. Instantly, panic struck as people checked doors and beds. Panic moved faster than any scout. Mothers dragged their kids into the center, and terrified fathers lied about their ages. 2 former guards quietly tore off their black sashes before anyone could even ask them to. The villain's warning was simple enough for everyone to grasp once Mara translated. Adults can pray all they want, the exhausted courier rasped. Parents can be easily owned. Finn gently touched the cord in Mara's hand, asking what his own knot meant. Mara closed her fist around it. For the first time tonight, she had absolutely no fast answer. Looking down through the holes of iron nest at hundreds of desperate people huddled under a literal pasta bowl pretending to be a fortress, I saw the truth. Up here, my room was dead silent except for the rain. That plastic colander had only bought them walls, not safety. Voss found the one door every single parent would open without asking the sky. He stopped assaulting their walls and started counting their kids instead. By the 6th dawn, Iron Nest did not sound like a secure fortress. It sounded like a steel pot with panic trapped inside. You can literally hear the terror as they pound the walls until the quarry rings. Mothers dragged children into the center, desperately counting them twice. They even counted other people's kids, because panic gets strangely generous when it is completely trapped. Meanwhile, fathers argued fiercely with guards over watched escape roads. 3 more refugee groups arrived by midnight, 5 by dawn, some just fragmented hamlets. All of them brought the exact same grim news. Their children were gone. These were not just warning stories. Empty blankets, cut ropes, and tiny footprints led straight toward the dark road before vanishing into the heavily rutted mud. By now, over 400 people were crammed under a literal pasta strainer. The tiny holes I admired yesterday were now just letting in rain, smoke, and endless begging. They constantly begged Mara to ask me for help. Move this, lift that. Look east, look west. Tell us if our boys are still breathing. The worst pleas were always the ones I could never answer. I could not see through the silver barrier. I could not reach every road. I could not just manifest a kid because their mother screamed. Sleeping was out of the question, which was likely obvious to everyone. My right hand was swollen purple from terrible feedback pain and sheer stupidity. Every time someone cried out for water, food, a lantern, a bandage, or a guard, some kind of miracle, I grabbed for anything. A bottle cap, a scrap of cloth, a grain sack, a miniature cart stuck under the edge. Just one more quick fix, one more small proof that I was still somehow useful. Down below, Mara stopped them from bashing the steel walls with pans. Screaming does not bring your children back, she yelled, but it definitely brought me crashing down instead. I remember carefully lowering a clay bowl towards Celeste's medical corner. I remember the barrier biting my palm like cold teeth. Then, everything tilted. My knees slammed into the hard floor, and my bleeding hand slid under the table as if gravity itself claimed it. The sky kept screaming without me. When I finally opened my eyes, there was Nina Alvarez standing over me with my keys and absolute murder in her face. Nah, sighs. She tells me to say the tiny woman under my coffee table is just a head injury. Mara, just 1 inch tall and absolutely furious, looks through the glass and demands this tall stranger stop staring. Na looks down, staring even harder at her. I try to sit up. She shoves me right back down with 2 fingers to my chest, like she is pinning a drunk patient to an ambulance stretcher, noting I missed 9 calls. She warns my door was unlocked with her spare key because I am the exact kind of idiot who would die quietly while she was busy. Then she grunts that I am on the floor next to a terrible aquarium. Mara touches her pendant, muttering she is not a fish. Na's mouth opens and closes. Then she kneels, her eyes turning clinical because that is where her fear hides. She checks my pulse, my pupils, and the dark bruise spreading across my hand. Down below, Mara answers 3 simple questions through me. Her name, my brother Finn's name, and how many kids are missing from the latest search. Na points straight at Mara, demanding she describe the room hidden behind my back. Mara names the red toolbox, the broken compressor, and the exact mug Na once threw at me during a long double shift. I forgot it, but Na definitely did not. Na stops trying to explain this away after the second answer. By the third, she quietly decides they are not calling anyone. Look at her. She doesn't wonder. She just makes a firm, tactical decision. She wraps my hand in clean gauze so tight I hiss, pulling a glove over it and warning me to avoid any bare contact. I argue it is not always possible. She snaps to make it possible or lose the hand. Just then, a search party returns below. No, not Finn. Mara spins around before anyone can speak. She looks at the empty space where he should be, noticing the small knife missing from his belt. For a second, her raw terror is painful to watch. Then Rafe arrives with tracks. He does not sugarcoat it. Your brother followed the cord posts, he says. making Mara's voice go thin. He went out alone with nothing but a knife and enough arrogance to be related to me. No one laughs. But Finn was not running blindly. Tracking the black cords from camp post to road marker, he kept low in the ditch grass whenever he could. At the first cart stop, he managed to cut one little boy loose. That kid returned with rope burns and a message from Finn. Adults lie when they get scared. That was classic Finn. But then, a black flag rises at Gallows Field, right on the edge of Mara's view. We move immediately because standing still means losing the children. Mara clutches her silver pendant tightly. Owen limps alongside her, ignoring his bleeding thigh while carrying a heavy hammer, while Rafe covers the ditch on our left. Mina stays above me, keeping a hand on my shoulder every time I lean too close. At the field, 126 children stand inside guarded rope rings around Marshal Corvin Voss. I finally see him clearly. This field was picked by someone who knows me too well and hates waste. Open ground, zero cover, and no easy way to rescue them. Every ring is spaced so that any dropped item hits the wrong people first. Voss has turned my giant size into a trap, placing vulnerable children inside every shadow my hand could possibly cast. Pay close attention to her face. Mara spots his crescent and completely freezes in fear. It is not surrender, but pure recognition. He wears a clean coat, dark gloves, silver-streaked hair, and boots polished despite the mud. He stands beneath a tall chain frame like it is a porch he owns, with Captain Sable at his right hand and children trapped in guarded rings. Voss touches a broken dark crescent at his throat, hanging in direct opposition to the silver pendant Mara wears. Mara notices, her fingers tightening on her silver. Eli Mercer, Voss calls out, his voice calm but clear. He does not need to shout. Mara's silver amplifies it. He sneers that he heard I prefer children alive, so let us test that preference. My hand goes flat on the glass. Mina warns me to stop as Voss smiles up at the wrong patch of sky. Bring him Mara Rook and her silver by sunset. In exchange, he promises to release most of the children under his guard. Mara spits into the mud. Voss mocks that majority is a butcher's word, and precision is mercy. Then, Sable pulls a heavy lever. An empty wooden demonstration cage suddenly collapses with a sickening crunch, making every single child in the front ring flinch in terror. He claims no one was hurt in the demonstration, warning us not to make him drop his theatrical performance. I want this man dead with a burning, absolute clarity. But in this field, there is no clean shot. Kids are trapped inside every shadow my giant hand casts, and some are barely toddlers. Others are old enough to realize Voss is using my own restraint as a weapon. I spot Finn near the second ring, chin up, one eye swelling shut, trying to look bored but failing. Voss looks directly toward Mara, telling her that her necklace is not an ear, but half of a door. Bring it to him, he says, and many parents will remember her kindly. Mara refuses to answer. We hole up in a dark rock hollow before sunset, pretending to plan because it beats screaming at the empty sky. Before Mara even speaks, I tell her no. She glares at me, saying I haven't even heard the plan. But I've heard enough. Owen nods hard, we are not trading her. Mara looks between us, dryly noting she didn't realize she was communal property. I snap back that this isn't what's happening. Then say it right, she demands. I lean in close. You are not handing yourself over. The silence is heavy, worse than any shouting match. Na grips my shoulder as Mara slowly touches her pendant. No kneeling, no orders she can't refuse. Was that a real deal, or does a command only count if it comes from someone weaker? No, it's just uglier when you try to say it kindly. For a second, I truly hate her. He'll keep Finn, I warn her. He'll keep you too. Voss takes whatever he wants because men like him don't trade fair. She knows. So why are we pretending there's a choice? Because Voss has hostages, and their desperate parents are listening. Rafe stands behind her, completely frozen. Mara grabs his hand just to steady herself. Wait, look closely at their hands, is that the hidden silver shard? My breath stops as she tucks it away. Get back to the iron nest, she whispers over the noise. Don't go to Eli first, swear it, Ra's protection is gone. Swear on your worst sin, a heavy oath. It is. I should have stopped her. I should have said anything else. Mara, I call out. Don't do this. Her face shifts. Sadder, maybe? She tells me to ask before trying to command her. Then she walks out of the hollow before we can stop her. When sunset hits, the swap begins. Mara steps into the enemy lines, hands up, with Owen's charred strap on her wrist. No armor, no backup. Just a lone, starving woman holding my entire world. Voss watches her approach like she's an honored guest. Search her, Sable snaps. But Mara keeps moving forward. Voss stops Sable with a hand. Let her keep her dignity, he says. We are only buying the useful pieces. Even now, My brain is desperately calculating angles, trying to find any excuse to unleash my power and slaughter them. The gates swing open. Kids stumble out toward the rescue carts, sobbing blindly, unable to even run straight. Panicked parents try to rush forward, but Owen and Della hold them back. Celeste checks for fever and shock, counting survivors. Up high, Na whispers counts she is powerless to change. Mara stops 10 paces from Voss. Release more, she demands. The freed children aren't making a heroic escape. They trip, search for their lost siblings, and shy away from help. Fear doesn't care about logistics. A little girl clings to Mara's skirt, begging her to turn back. Gently, Mara peels the tiny fingers off, pushing her toward safety. Honestly, this is the moment that completely breaks me. Not the villain's smug grin, but this. Just Mara comforting a child while walking to her doom. Voss opens the next gate, and more kids flee. But Finn doesn't move. He's stuck with 46 other children under heavy guard, kept absolutely still by the black banners. Finn screams out, but Sable grabs him by his coat and shoves him back into line. Before I can even think, my bandaged hand drops. Shadows sweep the field as Voss slides kids under my dark reach. He lines them up like delicate cups on a shelf, mockingly telling me to be careful. Gods are judged by what they destroy, he sneers. Mara screams at me to stop, so I freeze, utterly helpless. She unclips the pendant. The moment it leaves her neck, the world warps. The glowing relic burns bright. Voss reaches for it with gloved hands, making sure not to graze her skin. Half a door, he whispers, staring at the silver. You wore this around your neck like some holy prayer bell. Mara slaps his hand away, gesturing toward the wagons. Let them go first, she demands. Voss opens another gate, but not Finn's, not 44 others. He calls it insurance, and her face goes cold. He claims he was precise. Defeated, she hands over the relic. For one agonizing second, I watch it happen. Voss hands the silver to Sable, who locks it away inside a secure chest on the lead wagon. Mara's voice drifts back to us, thin and distant. Rafe has what actually matters. Then Sable shackles her wrists. Seeing this, Finn finally loses his cool and starts panicking. He screams her name until a guard gags him. Voss bows toward me, thanking me for my restraint. If my rage could burn through space, he'd be ash. The caravans roll away. I run after them until Nina pulls me back. Maybe I yell back, maybe I don't. The whole world just warps and fades. As the silver slid away inside Voss's box, I slammed my fist right onto the brass rim. The table boomed beneath us. Suddenly, the entire road buckled like some massive beast rolled under it. The covered wagon lurched violently. Horses screamed. Mara fell hard. Chained hands snapped up. Too late. Na grabbed my wrist with both hands. Stop. You are hurting them. That actually got through. It wasn't calm reason. It was pure terror held on a tight leash. Mara looked up through the parting gray haze, and I spotted a small smear of red on the wagon floor. I pulled back quickly. Na stared at the brass rim, breathing fast, and whispered, there is an iris under here. What? Explain later. Stop breaking our only way back. The view suddenly narrowed right onto Mara's face. No worship, no apology. Just command. Learn to trust us, she ordered, her voice fading into static. Before you lose us, and then the silver crossed whatever line Voss had chosen. The table died to gray. No road, no iron nest, no Mara. No Finn, either. Just flat gray light under glass, with my bandaged hand shaking right above it. Nina stood beside me, throwing my name out like a rescue rope into a dark well. For hours after Mara vanished, I kept talking to that flat gray glass like an apology could fix this. Nina let me try the reasonable things first. Keeping my voice light, placing a single fingertip near the surface without pressure. My wrapped palm hovered over the brass rim while she watched me closely, like I was both a patient and a crime scene. Nothing answered. No road. No iron nest. No Mara shouting at me. Just flat, dirty static buzzing beneath the table. It was bright enough to hurt, and empty enough to make my chest forget how to breathe. I can cut the rim, I told her. Na didn't look up from taping my swollen hand, asking if that cracks the glass? I didn't know. That is not a plan, she said. That is just grief with a screwdriver. I hated how fast she picked up the rules. She made me drink real water. Water from my side of the world, where cups were just cups, and nobody's child could ever drown in one. Then she forced me to eat half a protein bar. Staring at the gray, I swallowed cardboard in shame. 20 minutes later, the table blinked. But keep watching here, it wasn't open or alive like it was with Mara's pendant. A tiny, bright patch suddenly snapped into focus inside the gray, no wider than my own palm from where I stood. A hand filled it tiny, dirty, and shaking. It was Rafe Calder's hand. And caught right between his dirty fingers was that exact sliver of silver Mara had hidden from me. I almost laughed, almost cried. I did neither because Na's fingers dug straight into my shoulder, hard enough to remind me that I still had bones underneath. Ray's face leaned into the bright patch. His eye was swollen, rain dripped from his beard, and all his usual charm was scraped raw. Before you trust me, he muttered, you need the worst part. The view around him was useless yet precious 20 feet of iron nest, maybe less. Just one slice of a colander wall, thick mud, and a half-finished shutter. Owen's boots stood at the edge, Celeste's gray skirt moving like a blade. Outside that small circle, the world simply ended. Rafe stepped back 3 paces and vanished, then stepped forward to reappear again. That, Na whispered, is a tiny miracle. Story of my budget, I replied, sounding completely hollow. Rafe held the silver sliver up to the sky, explaining it follows this, not him, and not the nest. Suddenly, Owen's voice cut in from outside. Then chain him to a post, Celeste answered. After we use him, Rafe smirked. I do enjoy being valued solely for my charming personality. No, Celeste snapped. That was the absolute last joke any of us got for a while. Rafe knelt in the mud, placing the sliver on a flat stone right where I could see it. I marked Anwin's door, and the little circle fell silent. I thought I'd misheard him. Honestly, I desperately wanted to have misheard him. Rafe looked up at the gray sky and nodded to Owen. Cowardice, raw honesty, and the heavy rain made his face look much older. Months before the second sky opened, Voss's riders were hunting stolen grain. Or so they claimed. An old woman with hidden stores, a daughter running night routes, a young boy. I put a route sign on her lane for a black sun coin. Owen stepped into the circle in 2 quick strides and dropped Rafe with a single, brutal punch. Rafe hit the mud, rolled over, and never raised his hands. Good, bad, too much, or not enough? My head couldn't sort through the chaos fast enough. Celeste stepped between them, demanding children first. Owen's hammer shook in his fist. He put the bolt in Anwin. No, Rafe muttered through a swollen lip. I just opened the road for the man who did it. It was worse than defense. Every single part of me wanted to throw him out of that circle and slam the sky shut on his face. Instead, I stared at the silver sliver. Mara had given it to him. Mara, who knew he was dirty long before I did, yet still chose the only man capable of running Voss's roads while everyone honest was watched. Think about that, her hidden sliver became the first real vote after they took her. Nobody voted by a show of hands. We didn't have that kind of civilized world here. Owen demanded Rafe be bound tightly with a wagon chain. Dela wanted him watched by grieving mothers, which was somehow far less humane. Celeste wanted his face wrapped up so he wouldn't drip blood on the sliver and ruin our last chance. Na leaned close over my shoulder. Ask them what they need from you, she urged. I know what they need. Then why are they still arguing? It shouldn't have helped, but it did. I placed my bandaged hand right next to the glass, not through. I can only slip tiny things into that circle, like string or water. I cannot see anything beyond it, and I cannot protect anyone outside. Down below, Owen stares at the sky. Then, with absolute reluctance, he says, good, now stop promising safety and help us build a trap for him instead. Speaking in Owen's tired local dialect, I ask, can you get close to the children's convoy? Rafe wipes his mouth. Yes, and then we use him, I say. We do not forgive him. Owen looks up at me, clearly hating that I stole the exact words right out of his mouth. Afterward, Owen says. Rafe nods once after is still more than a sinner like me deserves. For just one breath, the 20-foot circle blinks out, snapping the entire view elsewhere. A dark wooden wagon, Mara is chained to a heavy bolt, her wrists bruised. Voss sits opposite her, slowly turning an unwrapped silver pendant. Then the view cuts back to Rafe's mud. Mara, I whisper, as Nena leans closer. Wait, was that a live feed? It has to be. Watch how Voss tilts the pendant to torment her. He knows I might be watching. That is his whole point. Your giant is much smaller without his sky, he says. Even with a bruised lip, Mara smiles. Most men look smaller when they start measuring themselves. Voss's polite mask does not slip. He hid safely above the glass while you starved, only helping when he felt merciful. He only calls himself a man when godhood gets too inconvenient. I feel Nena staring at me as Mara leans forward, her chains digging deep. And you call starvation order because murder sounds too common, she retorts. Voss watches her like a puzzle he must solve. You think he wants a partner. No, he wants absolution. You kneel, and he forgives himself. Yet, he asked me to stand. He literally forbade you from choosing. That blow lands hard. I feel it from 4 feet and 2 worlds away, but Mara does not look up. So did you, and he hated himself for it. Voss pulls out a tiny pin, and the vision cuts. When it returns, Blood marks her palm. He presses that drop against the silver edge. Instantly, the pendant glows blinding white-hot red, making Nena curse under her breath. It is not a gate yet. Back then, I did not even know that word, just raw heat. A bright red mark. And Voss watching like a scientist confirming a formula. Rafe carries the sliver down a narrow road under the afternoon sun. We can only see what is inside his tiny circle, 2 rock walls, a single rut, and Owen's shoulder. We also see 3 crouched scouts and the loop of cotton cord I lowered using tweezers. Outside that circle, we hear carts, kids, and shouting soldiers. Honestly, planning an ambush through this tiny hole is like performing surgery inside a raging fire. Not yet, Rafe whispers. I have already lowered 6 loops of heavy cotton cord down. No magic, no divine thunder, just simple, thick cords that Mara's allies tie behind rocks to the kids' wagons. They are simple traps. Sable's lead horses enter the narrow pass. Rafe waits until the second wagon crosses over our first loop. Then, he raises the sliver and shouts now. Owen smashes their log barrier down from above, while the scouts yank the cords tight. Wagon wheels jump. Horses scream. Guards stumble blindly forward into empty air where the road should have been. I easily could have reached down to grab them, but I do not. The circle is too small, and the children are too close. Intervening would only make me feel useful while these innocent kids pay the price. Instead, I hold a lantern over the glass, giving Owen a clear patch of light. He uses that beam of light to disarm an enemy guard instead of smashing his skull. The kids handle the rest because Finn had already started executing his own plan before we arrived. He had already sawed through his gag using a sharp nail on the cart, and now he is using it on the ropes of the little girl next to him. His face is swollen, but his hands are steady. Finn, I whisper, but he cannot hear me as a ruthless guard suddenly grabs him by the collar. Instantly, the little girl he just freed bites the guard's thumb. Owen delivers a heavy low blow, and Rafe takes a brutal spear hit while keeping the sliver up. Sable cuts through the chaos with 3 mounted men, riding not toward the children, but escaping. Seeing his rear guard collapse and the wagons compromised, he selfishly chooses the message over his captive cargo. Cold, rigid men are always predictable until survival instinct kicks in. Within 6 chaotic minutes, 46 children are completely freed from their chains. But they are not safe just yet. 2 scouts are wounded. Rafe can barely breathe, and a young boy cradles a severely injured arm. Finn only collapses after double-checking the head count and insultingly correcting Owen's math. That annoying attitude is how I know he is beautifully alive. They drag him safely into our circle. For the first time since everything went dark, Finn touches the silver sliver and finally hears my voice. Hey, I managed to say, because clearly genius completely deserts you at the emotional finish line. Finn looks up. You look terrible. Same to you. Good. His mouth starts to tremble. Then he quickly averts his eyes before relief can embarrass him. He had overheard the guards talking back when they thought he was just mindless cargo. Sable was heading down the chapel road to Gallows Crown. Behind an altar, Voss had this creepy blackstone socket. Finn had no clue what a socket even was. He called it a mouth in the wall for the dark necklace. Mina quickly scribbled that down on an old unpaid electric bill. By evening, the projection snapped wide open again, and this time, it was definitely not a wagon. It was a dark chapel carved straight into the black stone high above. Mara stood bound before a massive circular wall frame. The silver pendant was in Voss's hand, with the dark crescent at his throat. A thin red line touched both edges, now too strange to explain, but impossible to ignore. Voss brought the 2 halves closer. Watch this, the projection splits, and for 1 second, my table shows 2 different rooms. One was Gallows Crown Chapel, flickering with torchlight and heavy with damp, ancient smoke. The other looked like a modern lab, stainless steel, white tile, a dark glass pane, and a red leather glove pressing hard against the glass. A calm, clean voice came through the feed. Window 3 unauthorized observer confirmed. Beside me, Na stopped breathing. Voss flinched, but not enough. The voice warned him not to improvise again, because assets are easily replaced. But the silver is not. Mia heard the message too, and I saw the exact second she realized Voss served a bigger master and hated it. Through her matted hair, she whispered that his own god treats him like a tool. Voss's grip tightened. The red glove shifted. The voice ordered him to break the refuge and bring the witness and silver over once resistance was crushed. Then, the feed died. I stood over my glowing, empty table with Na's hand clutching my sleeve, the bitter taste of metal in my mouth. Another room, another watcher, another hand. For 6 whole days, they mistook me for a god. But Voss just brought a real monster, and it wore leather. A bloody red night fell over the road to Iron Nest. The flickering feed from the pendant showed us agonizing fragments. Mara, locked in an iron cage at the front. Sable was riding right next to her, his jaw set like a locked door. Voss rode behind the front rank, somehow looking perfectly clean. It made me hate him in a fresh, useful way as his black banner soldiers marched in hard columns. Hundreds of conscripts trudged between them, useless weapons, pure fear. Their stomachs were far too empty for bravery. There were women, elderly folks, and young boys barely tall enough to stand but too small to be spared. Voss had spread his vicious rumors perfectly. The fake sky would strike down cowards. An iron nest was hiding stolen children. He claimed Mara sold them out and was begging the army to yield. But through one quick flash, I saw her scratching the floor with a bent nail. Even bound by a heavy collar chain and 2 wrist cuffs, she still found time to alter the battlefield. Her carved message was ugly, crooked, and absolutely perfect. Avoid the crowd, break their command. But then, darkness cuts our view off again. The faint feed shifted right back to Iron Nest, where defense horns were already wailing. Owen stood waiting there with his heavy hammer and bandaged thigh. Celeste hid the children deep. Safe. Far away. Rafe leaned against a cold stone with broken ribs, clutching the glowing sliver, laughing bitterly. Confessing his sins had not killed him, so now he actually had to survive the fallout. Nena looked at me. I wanted to lie and say I could fix this. Instead, I just stared at that tiny glowing circle, knowing the massive enemy army was completely invisible to me unless Voss decided to reveal them. Mara's desperate, carved orders were still burned behind my eyes. For once, my only real job was to make sure they did not kill me first. Iron Nest's horns screamed. At dawn, Voss dragged Mara home in a cage. The very first thing Voss did at sunrise was force Mara to look at Iron Nest instead of my sky. That action said more than any speech ever could. Our weak screen showed only wet mud, Owen's heavy boots, and Rafe wheezing, as if his broken ribs were actively screaming. Then Voss finally uncovered the silver, and our view snapped wide open to the front lines. Mara was trapped inside a tight iron cage on a wooden cart, her wrists chained high, making her shoulders tremble. Sable sat beside her, his deadly crossbow aimed right through the cage bars at her back. Right behind them, the dark banner soldiers formed 2 flawless, terrifying lines. Packed between those formations were hundreds of poor conscripts holding rusty farm tools and kitchen knives, their hollow faces showing they knew nobody was rescuing them for free. Voss rode right behind the cage, clean coat buttoned up, the silver piece dangling from his belt by a dark cloth loop. The dark crescent rested flat against his throat, and tucked right under the heavy chain was a bloody, red-stained wrapping cloth. Mara spotted it immediately. Her face stayed blank. Cold, that's how I knew it cut deep. Behold the second sky, his smooth voice rang out, sounding like a scheduled execution. He demanded she tell her people to surrender and beg his sky for mercy. Sable jammed the crossbow deeper against her. Mara looked toward Iron Nest, then out at the terrified crowd that had been starved and fed nothing but lies. She shouted out, asking which of his high titles meant a coward hiding behind hungry children. I loved her timing far more than my own survival instinct. Voss smirked, telling her to preach, as Mara grabbed the cage bars, her chains scraping loud. The sky is listening, she shouted. So listen up before someone prettier tells you a lie. A few conscripts dared to look up. Most stared down, terrified that looking at either army would get them killed. Inside the Iron Nest, I saw quick flashes through the weak circle. Kids were hiding behind wooden shutterboards. I watched Della tying strips of bright cloth to arrows, helping her people spot friends in the chaos. Celeste dragged a young boy away from a firing slit by his ear. They were ready to fight. But one wrong move meant shooting hungry neighbors Voss used as human shields. The real trap was never the cage or the crossbow. The trap was turning mercy into a sign of weakness. Eli Mercer is no god, Mara yelled, hitting us harder than any arrow. I felt Na turn toward me. Mara kept shouting, saying he gets hurt, he panics, and he makes mistakes. She said he poisoned kids with food out of ignorance, and that she has told him no more times than she ate this week. Voss watched with a smug smile. Then Mara pointed her chained hand at him, yelling that he knows exactly what he is doing. Every burned wagon, every empty stomach, every stolen child. Those are not accidents. That is him trying to own you. The crowd started whispering as Mara shouted, "Drop your weapons and walk away from that black banner, and Eli will spare you. If they say the sky kills deserters, ask yourself why Voss needs you standing between him and certain death." Then, the first weapon fell near the left column. No big dramatic show, just a crude spear clattering into the mud. Another dropped. Voss stopped smiling. He called for Sable, who barked orders as the black banner line marched forward through the crowd with shields raised. They were not charging Iron Nest. They were forcing the terrified crowd back into line. Mara's warning burned in my mind. Do not hurt the innocent. Kill the leaders instead. I'd been staring at a clear plastic lid on my kitchen counter since midnight. It was just a scratched, old plastic container lid. I was supposed to eat but could not. Not a weapon, Just a barrier. Na saw me reach out. It was a clean cut. I told myself it was ugly, but still better than a grave. I dropped the lid down. The battlefield erupted in screams as a massive transparent wall slammed down, dividing the soldiers from the terrified conscripts. It did not land perfectly, but it crashed deep into the wet mud, kicking up heavy clouds of dust. Both sides could see right through it. That was crucial because fear hates things it cannot understand. The fighting did not stop, but it completely changed the flow of the clash. Look, a wall does not suddenly make terrified people brave. It just gives them one brief second where the enemy cannot reach their throat. And 1 second was enough for a mother to grab her son. Another family followed. Suddenly, the panic started shifting away from us and back toward Voss. A spear slammed into the barrier and bounced right off. One soldier tried to climb it, sliding down like an angry bug on a glass window. Owen yelled from the iron nest gates. No shooting unarmed men, only the ones in black cloth. Archers launched arrows through the colander holes. They carefully avoided hitting the innocent crowd. They targeted shields, banners, and officers forcing men forward. Meanwhile, Della's refugees used ropes to pull open escape gaps. Terrified conscripts scrambled away, some carrying children while others helped the wounded. Some just collapsed to their knees, overwhelmed that freedom actually came this fast, and yet, Voss stayed totally silent. That silence was terrifying. The weak sliver pulled my focus aside, revealing Wraith wearing a stolen black cloak. For a second, I thought Owen had knocked him unconscious to steal his outfit, which would have been incredibly rude but brilliant. Then Wraith looked up with a bloody face, offering the most pathetic salute you have ever seen from someone with a broken nose. He slipped behind our plastic wall alongside 2 defectors wearing stolen sashes, hiding the sliver inside his blood-stained sleeve. Through that 20-foot gap, I saw the stockade, prisoners in collars, and wounded men. 2 carts were loaded with tired kids, their guards completely distracted by my impossible wall. Rafe snapped his fingers. "Fall back, the warden wants witnesses alive," he yelled. A guard hesitated, but Sable was too busy dealing with my kitchen lid. Rafe barked to move. It almost worked. But almost was exactly where Rafe Calder spent his entire life. A guard recognized him, calling out Calder. Instead of running, Rafe opened the first holding cage, and the guard slammed a spear into his ribs. Rafe collapsed, coughing, but held on to the lock. Inside, a female prisoner grabbed the metal bar and pulled it open. The gates flew open as people flooded out. Not brave or organized, they were just done being owned. These prisoners did not look like heroes from some song. Some stumbled, while others covered their eyes because the bright daylight felt like a cruel trick. An old man even tried to turn back for a bundle of rags, until a tiny girl slapped his arm and yelled that it was empty. Voss hid proof behind his army. Rafe crawled to the second lock. "Leave it," I yelled, completely useless. He could not hear me unless he actually touched the sliver. And he never listened anyway. Bravery and stupidity are basically the same thing here. He reached Mara's cart before getting brutally knocked down. I watched him jam something under the hinge. A pin shifted. Not enough to open it, but enough to rattle the cage. Suddenly, 3 black banner guards dragged him under the wagon, pulling him completely out of my sight. Owen saw him drop. For once, Owen looked like his anger was getting in the way. The freed prisoners slammed straight into the backline. Voss retaliated by destroying food. He pointed directly at the grain wagons trailing behind his massive army. They were covered in dark canvas with mercy marks. "Burn them." A soldier froze, and Voss slowly turned his head. "Food is only for the obedient. Burn what they think they earned." Torches flew, canvas caught, and oil blazed down wheels. The dark smell reached even my side of the table. Or maybe my mind just invented it because it hates me. Sacks burst under the heat, spilling grain into the fire. Conscripts stared. Full wagons of actual food. Voss had marched with their starving people while lying that iron nest, stole their kids. Nearby, a woman screamed, charging a guard with a dirty hoe. A young boy reached desperately toward the blazing grain, but Celeste's runners quickly yanked him away from the heat. Soldiers who had dropped their weapons snatched them back up, turning directly toward the black banners. Sable rode through thick smoke, screaming for water. A girl in a black scarf called him father from the wagons. He glanced toward her, but froze when Voss stared back. That tiny hesitation would end up mattering so much later. Mara took her chance immediately. The cage hinge snapped right where Rafe had wedged the pin. She slammed her shoulder into the wooden door. On the third slam, it burst open, throwing her onto the wheel. Sable immediately lunged to grab her. Owen hurled his massive hammer. It barely missed Sable's head, smashing the frame with a blow that made the cart jump. Classic, subtle work from Owen Pike. Extremely delicate. Basically, just diplomacy with heavy iron. Mara did not wait around for politeness. She leaped off the cart straight at Voss. He drew his blade, but she dove under, rolling through mud and burning grain to rise with a broken pin. He tried stepping back, but prisoners hit his flank while conscripts shoved from the other side. For the first time since I had met him, Corvin Voss was trapped in a crowd he could not control. Mia reached for his belt, grabbing the silver piece. Voss grabbed her wrist. "No," he barked. Mia bared her teeth. "Funny," she spat. "I was about to say the exact same thing about this march." Pressing her bleeding palm against his stained, filthy wraps, she twisted hard and ripped the silver free. "Get ready, because the world just blasted back open." Full sound, screaming, fire, steel, and Mara's voice ringing in my head so clear it actually hurt. For a second, the entire battlefield held its breath as the conscript saw Mara clutching that silver. Iron Nest saw her breathing. Voss saw every single lie he had built between these two moments start to crumble completely. And I finally realized what I missed back at Gallows Field. She never actually needed me to rule the sky. She just needed me to keep the path open long enough to use it. "Ceiling," she barked, and I almost wept at that dumb nickname. Horrible timing. "Your call," I told her. "Get everyone out," she ordered. "Conscripts first, then me." There it was, our quiet reconciliation. No apologies, no dramatic music, just a demand I did not want and a fleeting chance to obey her. I tilted that transparent cover down, laying it like a clear ramp across the thick mud between Iron Nest and the broken front line. The far edge cracked when a guard's axe smashed into it. I held on anyway, my leather glove groaning over my bandaged hand. "Move," Owen screamed. Conscripts slid, crawled, and dragged each other across the plastic while the Iron Nest fighters covered their desperate escape. Inside the metallic hold, frightened children pressed silently against the shutter slits. Celeste actually smacked a bleeding man for trying to faint in the way, forcing him to crawl faster. Mara climbed up last. Voss lunged for her ankle. Sable stepped in, blocking Owen from reaching Voss. Not saving Voss. Not yet. He was just strictly following his given orders. Mara booted Voss's hand away, sliding down the plastic towards safety like some incredibly furious saint who completely ignored all transport manners. I wanted to keep her safe under my hand forever. Instead, I slowly lifted my fingers away. She tumbled off the cracked edge into Owen's arms, pushing him away before he could even look relieved. Fastening the silver around her neck with trembling hands, she stood back. Voss was on the far side of the blazing wagons, his lips split and dark coat badly scorched. Around him, his grand army was shattered. It was just scattered groups running in every direction. Seeing this, his voice finally boomed out. "Fall back to Gallows Crown." His black banner elites quickly retreated around him. Sable rode closely at their flank. Two soldiers dragged the dazed Rafe by his arms, yet he still desperately guarded his cuff, keeping it pressed tightly against his chest. Mara saw him. So did Owen. But getting to him through those raging flames meant sacrificing the very people they had just saved. Voss left us with nothing but heavy costs, scorched food, and brutal injuries. He also left a guilty prisoner we couldn't just abandon. As we retreated up the northern road, the silver on Mara's throat went icy cold, then blistering hot. In response, the dark mark on Voss's chest flared across the miles. For one brief moment, his voice and a stranger's echoed in unison. It sounded calm, almost modern. It ordered us to open at dawn, and to bring the witness if she follows. If she refuses, burn the refuge until she submits, then bring me that unauthorized observer instead. Beside me, Na's grip tightened on the table. Mara finally looked up, her face covered in dark soot, her lip bruised, but thankfully alive. "Well?" she whispered softly. "Just for my ears now, he's gone and made it rude not to visit." The faint view flickered near their retreating wagon. Rafe was conscious enough to scratch a crooked mark into the wood, using a nail he had hidden somewhere I really didn't care to think about. A hook, a blank stare, and a black mouth. Behind him, for a split second, a painted chapel icon stood tall beside a massive face. Honestly, I had no idea why that mattered. Looking thin, bruised, and wrapped in Celeste's blanket, he touched the glowing silver and stared. "That is the chapel road," he muttered. The mouth and the wall. Behind us, Iron Nest cheered for Mara's freedom. In front, Voss carried Rafe and that black artifact toward Gallows Crown. The ruined grain wagons burned all day long, until the evening air smelled like a bakery on fire. At dawn, heaven itself would become a doorway Voss intended to breach. Finn sketched that dark mouth in the wall while the wagons still burned. He used charcoal on the back of a split crate, keeping one swollen eye squinted shut. Celeste's blanket kept slipping off his shoulder as he bent forward. All around him, Iron Nest sounded like a beaten army celebrating victory. Some cheered because Mara was free, others wept because their food was pure ash. The wounded waited quietly. Complaining too loudly got you sent straight to Celeste, and she was already terrifying enough without a line. The ruined wagons kept popping as grain sacks burst open, almost as if Voss was still feeding the flames after losing the battle. Every cheer was choked with heavy smoke, and every plan started by asking who would eat tomorrow. Mara sat down right next to Finn, the silver pendant secured around her neck and her sliced palm bandaged in gray cloth. That pendant made the entire quarry crystal clear again. Full sight, full sound, and total responsibility. Just great. I actually missed having it until it came back, and then immediately wished it had a volume knob. Finn scratched out a rough circle here. Na leaned right over my table, keeping one hand on her notebook while pinning my wrist back. Apparently, trust still required constant supervision. Draw the frame again, she ordered. Finn glared up, having zero desire to humor this annoying stranger. He did a terrible job. The circle had jagged grooves like teeth, with 3 floor chains and a woman standing next to a massive, haunting face. Nina froze instantly. What? I asked. Na pointed beneath the brass rim, then toward the spring clamp. It was the exact same curve. Whatever opens this thing has to close it. Celeste, her cuffs heavily stained with soot and medicine, crossed herself once at the drawing. Mara noticed immediately. You recognize this symbol. I saw that exact mark painted over in an old convent infirmary, Celeste whispered. She spoke of 2 mirrors and 1 road, before the sister was taken. Nobody asked where she went. No one wanted that answer before dawn. Celeste wiped the charcoal dust off her thumb, looking directly at Mara instead of me. Totally logical, but still a direct blow to my ego. Whatever this relic was, it definitely didn't belong to the tall idiot upstairs just because he happened to have a slightly better vantage point. Mara touched her silver pendant, repeating the cryptic words Anwen had left her. My mother called us line keepers. She said black and silver must meet. Let the small walk tall, and the tall reach the small. Her voice remained entirely flat. Honestly, I always thought she just meant spirits. Mothers absolutely love dropping terrible riddles on you and leaving. Sounds like highly efficient rural parenting, Mina remarked dryly. Mara shot her an incredibly exhausted look. Do all tall women insult grief like this? Only when that grief is about to get someone killed. Celeste tapped the drawn emblem. Just 1 opening, 90 heartbeats, and a single drop of blood from the witness. The quarry felt smaller around those words. 90 seconds, Na muttered. Maybe, I replied as she glared. Mercer is fine, probably. I hated how dry my voice sounded. 2 halves, a fixed socket, 1 keeper's drop, and a quick crossing. That is all we currently know. It is not nearly enough to use safely. Mara held up her bandaged palm. Voss already has his drop, and that dark half, Mina added. And he has the temple built specifically for it. I glanced down at the iron rim beneath my table, then we seal our side, lock it down. We break the lever if we have to. Mara just stared upward. I realized my mistake before she even spoke. Progress, but horrible progress. If you close your sky, she warned, Rafe remains trapped in his cage forever, and Voss keeps that dark gateway. And tomorrow, he'll burn anyone who won't drag me back. He wants my head. Let him line up. It shouldn't feel good. But it did. My priorities were totally messed up. Still, we are hitting Gallows Crown. Mara is clear we free Rafe. We must reach the chapel before dawn. If that door opens, we dictate the terms. Owen pointed down the burning road with his massive hammer. Fighters wounded. Food gone. We're running on fumes. If Rafe is still breathing, he's in their cart. And you want to deliver Voss exactly what he needs? Yes, Mara answered. Because if we don't, he returns with fire and a much larger army. No one liked that. Harsh truth has a nasty way of showing up uninvited and making itself right at home. The crowd only caught fragments of translation, but they understood. Keeping a wraith alive meant paying another heavy debt. If Voss opened heaven, tomorrow wouldn't be a defense. It would be a brutal invasion with sharp teeth and zero mercy. Her eyes instantly sharpened. I forced myself to speak before freezing up again. Wait, tell me the plan before I start playing the idiot and forbidding everything. Na finally released my wrist. Mara just stared at me, silent. Good. You can learn. But the strategy had to wait until the wounded were safe. And that's when things get heavy. Mara suddenly looks at me and asks why stopping feels so impossible. I couldn't even meet her eyes. Na didn't look away. Of course she didn't. She was the one who held my dying brother's side while I stood 7 feet away, completely frozen. So I told Mara the truth about Jonah. No poetic spin, no hero stories, just a massive warehouse fire, a collapsed rack, and suffocating black smoke. My brother was pinned down. I could see his hand desperately moving. For 7 seconds, my body knew the job, but my brain completely shut down. 7 seconds of Na screaming my name. 7 seconds that I sharpened into a brutal knife, carrying it around with me for 3 whole years. I finally moved, I told her, then the ceiling collapsed. Na's voice was a whisper. You had a concussion, your mask seal was cracked. You weren't just standing there picking wallpaper. Jonah died. And you made the rest of your life a heavy punishment. Mara gently touched the silver pendant with her good hand. Voss controls absolutely everyone, so he never has to feel helpless again. My throat instantly tightened. She didn't hold back. You try to control danger, but innocent people get trapped inside it. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, she said. It's supposed to be useful, real helpful, Mara. She leaned over the silver. If it opens, I need 90 seconds. No rescue attempts. No grabbing whoever terrifies you most. Just 90 seconds, and you ask before you touch anything. I desperately wanted to make a perfect promise, but I knew what those were worth. I can try, was all I said. Mara nodded. That isn't as pretty, but I trusted a lot more. After that, we prepared both battlefields. Sounds fancy, right? In reality, it just meant Na and I fighting over which end of a fire extinguisher to point at the guy trying to decapitate me. Downstairs, Mara had her hands full arguing with 3 wounded fighters who thought loyalty meant doing way too much. War is mostly terrible logistics. Dressed in incredibly dramatic clothes, Nina cleared my workbench with the pure fury of a woman who hates clutter during an apocalypse. Tools crashed onto the floor. A broken toaster, old bills, and my favorite mug were instantly thrown out. She set the fire extinguisher by my knee, then propped the door open with a toolbox. She clicked the brass iris lever until it snapped shut, making every single person down below jump in sheer panic. Sorry, she shouted down. To them, it sounded like thunder. Mara translated it as the giant woman says, the sky has hinges and zero manners. Nina pointed right at her and declared, I like her. Down below, Mara rejected almost everything. The chrome cooling rack from my counter was lowered down. It was a massive piece of metal that could literally bridge a moat, unless I messed up and caused another disaster. She also took one thick shoelace to use as a descent line. Look at this, I offer her zip ties, a flashlight, tape, and a knife. But she just raised her hand. Stop. More gear just means you're trying to be everywhere at once. I shut the drawer. Owen handpicked the Vanguard despite his badly injured thigh. Celeste mapped out escape routes and put Finn in the back with the stolen chapel blueprints. Della took charge of the defectors who actually knew the enemy horn signals. Finn complained loudly until Mara told him that smart boys survive by holding maps instead of playing hero. Offended but alive, he kept muttering. Just before midnight, they all marched out of Iron Nest. Before leaving, Mara forced the rescued prisoners to make a hard choice. Either stay behind locked doors under heavy guard, or join the frontline assault under our banner. Some stayed, some fought, no one was praised for either decision. It was a strange feeling. Maybe that is what real freedom looks like before it gets polished. Mara carried the heavy silver. We moved in silence through the thick, black smoke of the ruined fields. Every single step toward Gallows Crown made the pendant burn hotter. Every single time that silver piece pulsed, Na stared at the control lever, and every time she looked, I wanted to pull it. But I didn't. Gallows Crown loomed before sunrise like a jagged black tooth over the road. Voss built this entire nightmare around starvation, narrow bridge, dry moat, and prison cages hanging along the walls, so starving prisoners could smell the granary food they were never allowed to touch. Rafe was trapped somewhere in there. Mara stopped at the moat, looking up as I finally lowered our heavy bridge. The bars slammed onto the stone, bounced hard, and almost slid right down into the waterless ditch. Owen and 2 rebels threw heavy hooks to secure the nearest bar. On the other side, desperate hands reached through a grate to catch the end. These captives weren't even ours. A few still wore those grim black banner ration tags. They had the completely hollow look of people promised food for obeying, only to get chains. They hauled on the bars before any guard realized this was a bridge. Arrows pinged off Chrome as a fighter slipped through the bars. He clung on by his elbows, yelling as enemy boots rushed toward his fingers. One-handed, Owen grabbed his collar and hauled him up. A woman behind him took an arrow straight to her shoulder armor but kept crawling. Stopping on this giant makeshift bridge was an incredibly fast way to plummet. I wanted to cover them. Mara didn't even look up. Don't, she warned. I know you are thinking loudly, cross faster. She did, and trust me, the outer yard turns into pure, unscripted chaos. Prisoners dragged guards down from behind. Rebels screamed fake orders, and Della's crew sliced cage ropes. Celeste's runners guided the first freed kids under a stone overhang. I lowered absolutely nothing else. It felt like standing near a fire with full buckets, only to be told that water would ruin the house. Mara tracked Finn's route mark through a service archway and down a dark, soot-stained hallway. There they found Rafe, hanging from a metal wall ring right by the chapel stairs. His face looked like he had a brutal argument with the floor and lost hard. He saw Mara and managed a weak grin that seriously needed a doctor, rasping that she actually came as she sliced his wrist rope. Mara muttered that he left directions and she is pretty obedient when annoyed, as Rafe collapsed onto Owen, who caught him like a heavy sack. Talk, Mara demanded. Rafe spoke, stripped of his usual gambler charm. His words came out staggered because breathing was agony, and he wasn't hiding his guilt anymore. Voss wasn't saving any of that grain for the coming winter. Harsh orders from the high-ups said to burn all surplus before rebels ate, then herd up the artisans and blacksmiths. Keep them starving so they work, and send coded messages right through the black aperture. He swallowed back the pain, speaking of the cold steel, those black sun coins, and the cruel tools the officers called holy. This famine was a deliberate choice piled on bad crops. Voss worsened the hunger because desperate, starving hands work much cheaper. The corridor went dead silent besides the distant fighting. Mara's expression never flickered, but her grip tightened hard around Anwen's strap as she whispered that this was why her mother ran. Rafe nodded, admitting she stole the silver after seeing Voss open a portal, adding that he marked her door before he knew. Mara flatly stated that doesn't fix it. Rafe then mentioned seeing Jory displayed at the gate with Mara's board. Voss executed him for returning with nothing, but Mara simply muttered that this just makes the debt accurate as they climbed. The chapel inside Gallows Crown was quite a bit smaller than I expected and way uglier, too. Dark stone walls, a circular frame, and deep chain grooves in the floor exactly like Finn's drawing. The old mural above the altar depicted a small woman standing right next to a massive, imposing face. The paint over her eyes was completely gone, and all around the frame, countless finger marks had rubbed the stone smooth, as if generations of terrified souls touched this warning, hoping it was just a myth. Look at this right under that warning, stands Voss, slotting the black crescent into place. Sable blocked the exit with 6 heavily armed men. Rafe slumped between Owen and a captive, while Mara stepped forward, her silver medallion burning. Voss smiled like some welcoming host, telling her she brought the key back, but Mara just unsheathed her blade. She spat that she brought a knife too, so don't feel left out. Then, the black crescent clicked, snapping the silver chain tight around her neck and pulling her. I reached out instantly, but my gloved fingers slammed against a strange membrane and stopped. Not blocked, warned. Heat surged up my arm as Mara desperately braced her boot in the floor. Owen grabbed her belt to pull her back, but Sable lunged his spear at Owen's bad thigh, triggering absolute chaos. Voss ripped the bandage from Mara's hand, letting a drop of blood touch the silver as Nina whispered. She warned that the clock starts now. Suddenly, the frame erupted with black light looking like a swirling, oily mirror. Unbelievably, my own workbench appeared inside the portal from the other side, with me staring back like some clueless idiot on an altar. Voss shoved Mara hard to the side instead of pushing her through. He leaped into that oily mirror before Owen could grab him. 1 second, he was tiny. The next, he crashed onto my workbench 6 feet 2, armor clanging, sword drawn. His 2 guards stood beside him, expanding into massive men with sharp blades and hungry, cold eyes. Voss stared straight at me without even looking up. No sky or worship, just a tired repairman, my bandaged hand, Nena swearing, and a smiling tyrant who treated our world like a room he now owned. Voss's first massive sword swing sliced through my workbench, right where my hand was resting just 5 minutes ago. That blade chopped right into the plywood, splitting paper and sending my tools flying. I only dodged because Nina shoved me, not because I had some kind of legendary combat instinct. If history says otherwise, burn the book. Voss stood on my workbench in armor that grew with him, 6'2" and broad enough to block the portal behind him. His 2 guards landed right next to him with weapons drawn, blinking hard because even ruthless killers need a moment to process bright fluorescent lighting. He crossed over with everything he cared about: a sharp blade, heavy armor, polished boots, and the belief that height equaled morality. The gate kept pulsing, showing the chapel below. There was Mara, dragged by a silver chain. Owen rammed his shoulder into Sable while Rafe desperately crawled for a falling key. Look at this, our 2 completely different worlds just collided into one chaotic room with a massive hole in the floor. My plan was simple because panic loves simple: keep Voss away, and keep Nena alive. Stop those guards from finding the stairs, and somehow survive inside my own messy apartment where I still had a sink full of dirty dishes. Good priorities, terrible timing. I got even less than that when a guard lunged straight for Nina. She grabbed a metal tray from the workbench and smashed it right into his sword arm. Metal clanged, sending him stumbling over an extension cord. Voss stared straight at me and smiled, saying, "There you are, the little repairman standing above heaven." I backed up, slamming hard into the table as the brass edge dug right into my spine. Down below, through the open dark mirror, I saw flashes of Mara in the chapel, desperately holding onto the socket. Rafe was doubled over by the stairs while Sable pushed soldiers back. Then Voss charged again, 90 seconds sounds like plenty, until a sword is swinging at your neck. Nina screamed left, so I threw my body aside. Voss's blade sliced right where my face just was, smashing into the old fryer compressor. Sparks exploded from the dead wiring. Great. My broken kitchen appliances chose this exact moment to get dramatic. Voss stepped off the workbench like he owned my place. He asked if I saw the difference between us. I grabbed a fire extinguisher, telling him that I actually pay rent here. Looking at my cracked cabinets, the patched window, and a mattress poorly hidden behind a curtain, I pulled the pin and blasted him right in the face. White chemical fog swallowed his smug cruelty. Voss staggered back coughing, raising his arm to block his eyes. Near him, a guard slipped in the fog and smashed into a toolbox Nina wedged by the stairs. Nina grabbed the heavy extension cord and yanked hard, wrapping it tightly around the guard's ankles. He crashed down hard, his long blade carving a deep line straight through my wooden floor. She jumped him before he could react, driving her knee straight into his wrist to send his weapon clattering. And check this out. For one brief moment, all their crazy preparation actually starts paying off. She was actively fighting the socket, bracing her arm against the silver metal with her hands stained deep red. Every time Voss shifted in my apartment, the dark frame reacted. The ancient floor grooves in the chapel flickered and died. Owen screamed out numbers until his voice gave out. Sable tried to shove him off the line, but he just shoved back with the pure fury of a man too busy to care. Rafe struggled to stand, dragging one prisoner away from the frame while waving the others toward the emergency stairs. Unforgiven, yet still useful. Apparently, that was the most honest prayer left in both worlds. I saw those flashes between sword swings. Suddenly, the second guard reached Nena, but I blocked him with a heavy tool case. The blade cut through the plastic, stopping barely an inch from my arm. Pain flared through my right hand, and his next swing ripped my sleeve, scraping my skin. I smashed him with the case anyway. This was not a pretty fight. It was just two exhausted adults trying to survive by throwing anything heavy at a ruthless intruder. Down below, Mara's voice cracked, shouting 60 as I heard Owen grunt. Metal clanged against stone. Someone screamed below. I desperately wanted to look, but I could only focus on the monster trying to take Nena's head. He shoved me back, cracking my ribs against the porcelain sink. White-hot pain blinded me. Nena reached for the iris lever under the table, desperately trying to test the latch with her good hand. The second guard saw the movement and instantly slashed at her. The blade ripped open Nina's sleeve, grazing her arm just enough to make her furious but not stop her. She didn't scream. Instead, she made this tight, strained sound of pure annoyance, like her body was just ruining her schedule. Mercer, she grunted, pressing a cloth to the cut sink. I grabbed the guard's belt and drove us both into it. The faucet snapped sideways, blasting freezing cold water straight onto his face. He gagged and slipped, letting Nina kick his knee so hard I heard it break before we rammed him through the stairwell door. He hit the landing hard. Nina kicked the wedge free, and I slammed the door shut, jamming a broken mop handle inside. The guard pounded furiously on the other side. That was one down, one locked out, and one monster left in my apartment. Voss exploded out of the extinguisher cloud, white powder clinging to his coat while his nose bled. And trust me, he looks like some terrifying funeral statue come to life as Maya screams out 50 from below. Her frantic shout pulled my eyes to the gate, making the chapel suddenly snap into sharp focus. Mia clutched the silver with a bleeding hand while Owen desperately held the black socket with shaking arms as Sable hammered him with a heavy spear. Nearby, Rafe was slicing through prisoner chains with a tiny knife, just as Mara saw me stumble and fall. She saw Nina hurt and Voss recovering, so she made a split-second choice while Owen screamed at her to stop. Rafe muttered something about stupidity being their only option, but I honestly didn't hear any of it. All I saw was Mara putting her dagger between her teeth, grabbing the silver, and stepping directly into the mirror. And get this, she lands barefoot right on my workbench, instantly growing into a full-sized woman before my eyes. Having her at full human size right here in my room was something my brain wasn't ready for, and her first breath sounded completely wrong. She sounded too grand for the woman I only knew through thunder and silver. She flexed her hands, stared at them, and then looked up at my ceiling as if checking if I even had one too. Honestly, she was terrified. She had just grown to the massive scale of the giant she had spent 9 days arguing with. For the first time, I finally understood why my massive face above the glass had terrified those desperate people. This kind of size wasn't comforting, it was a loaded weapon with skin on it, and she stepped right into my world. She made the choice before I could even process the price, every damn time. She stumbled once, proving that traveling between worlds doesn't come with free balance lessons. Then she spat the dagger from her teeth, and drove it deep into the seam of Voss's shoulder armor, making him roar. She stared at me across the bench, her eyes wide and hair totally loose, while my messy apartment reflected behind her like a sick joke from a cruel god. You're shorter than expected, she said. I was bruised and terrified, but stupidly close to laughing as I replied that she was louder. Good, she retorted. You hear better this way, right before Voss backhanded her off the bench and she hit the floor rolling, springing back up instantly. Nina quickly threw her the guard's metal tray, which Mara caught awkwardly but used to deflect Voss's next deadly strike. She wasn't helpless at this scale, she was disoriented, furious, and adapting to the room way faster than Voss wanted. That made two of us as the gate pulsed behind him, and Owen strained to count down 40. Voss yanked her dagger from his shoulder and flung it aside, a dark stain spreading under his armor. Look at you, he sneered, his breathing heavy but voice still smooth, standing right where your mother never dared to step. Mara's face tightened just a fraction, which was all Voss needed to see before pressing his twisted offer. No mud, no bowls of boiled bark, and no crying children begging you for salvation. Just a real, wealthy life up here. You'll have beautiful rooms and doors that open at your touch. I pushed off the sink, snapping that he just meant a better cage. Voss ignored me, telling Mara that he would keep her alive, while I would only keep her feeling guilty. Mara glanced around my messy apartment. She saw Nina's torn sleeve, my shaking hand, and the table that made me a god but now made me feel like simple furniture. Then she glared at Voss, telling him that buying freedom by making others small was his religion, not hers. Voss's polite mask slipped, baring his teeth, as Nina silently slid behind him toward the lever. I spotted the dark crescent at his throat, its chain half ripped from the socket. It was still hot, pulsing with energy toward the gate. If we ripped it off, the door might fail or completely tear this room apart, killing everyone inside. My plan had zero guarantee of survival and was pure emotional desperation, but I lunged forward anyway. Mara lunged right beside me. For once, we didn't need any translation. I reached out and grabbed Voss's sword wrist with both hands. The wounded guard almost collapsed entirely. Mara slammed the metal tray right into his elbow, while Na yanked the dark chain from behind. Suddenly, the black crest flared up. A wave of heat got the room. The portal behind us buckled inward, looking like a hungry mouth. Every loose tool on the workbench slid right toward it. Screws, a wrench, an unpaid bill, even the mug Na threw at me once. My entire pathetic life was literally sliding away into another world. Voss let out an ugly, relieved laugh, saying the path finally recognized its master. Then why is it choking you? Mara snapped. The black crescent cracked, not fully. A thin red line split along the edge. Voss roared in pure rage, and the portal post doubled. It ripped the stairwell door open, dragging both guards straight forward. One guard vanished right into the mirror, shrinking as he went. The second guard followed at normal size. Na slipped on the extinguisher powder, crashing into a cabinet while clutching her open wound. 30, Owen yelled from below. But the count sounded totally wrong, now stretched and warped. The portal had stopped counting politely. Voss grabbed Mara by the waist, dragging her back toward the glass. I lunged and caught her bare wrist. The glowing red brand on her palm touched my bare skin through my torn glove. Pain exploded through my hand, like lightning burning right under my bones. Every old injury, the Amwin bruise, the bridge wound, the gallows field strain flared up all at once. But I held on anyway. The barrier caught us, leaving Mara suspended between two worlds. Her hand was locked in mine while her boots dragged toward that dark light. Voss held her other arm, his shattered crest burning hot red at his throat. Down through the reflection, the chapel floor seemed to rise toward us like a tilted room. No, I gasped. Brilliant final argument, she said. Then she looked at our hands and realized the truth before I did. The portal was dragging me down too. Talk about a nightmare scenario. My knees slid, the metal rim slammed into my thigh, and holding on meant getting ripped apart between worlds. Na grabbed the back of my shirt, but she couldn't stop the pull. Eli, she called out. I gripped tighter, but she suddenly kicked my chest with everything she had, knocking the wind out of me as my fingers slipped. Na yanked me backward with absolutely everything she had left. I hit the floor hard on my back, just as Mara and Voss vanished forever into the black mirror. The gate snapped shut. The dark light folded away, spilling a bloody red wash across the table. With one final flash, Mara and Voss crashed hard into Gallows' crown. The dark crescent tore from Voss's neck and locked into the cracked socket, its short chain still hooked tightly through his chest harness. He was left chained to the wall as the glass finally faded to black. And this was not that soft gray color from before. Just pure darkness. The silver surface still showed them, but when I slammed my hand forward, I only hit cold, solid air. Below us, an eerie crimson light spread over Gallows' crown. Mara rolled quickly away from Voss. She was alive, but holding her injured shoulder. Voss staggered to his feet by the cracked socket, covered in white dust with a bloody scrape and all his confidence completely gone. Sable screamed out orders I could barely hear, while Owen limped toward Mara on a buckling leg. Rafe was still breathing, proving that even a massive debt has survival instincts. Na collapsed next to me, clutching her arm while holding my shirt tightly. "Do not," she muttered. I had not even realized I was desperately trying to force my hand through the glass again. I stared down at Mara under that creepy crimson sky. She looked up and locked eyes with me, offering no apology. Good, because that would have broken me. The tyrant had literally broken into my home only to get himself trashed. Mara had stood right in front of me for barely a minute. Yet, she saved my life by violently kicking me away from her. Now, I could only watch her run under that blood-red sky. And when I desperately tried to reach her, the world just slammed a door right in my face. The barrier was not glass or air, just solid, biting cold under my palm. I hid my hand away because pain was still teaching me a lesson. Nothing opened. Down below, Mara rolled behind a stone pillar as Voss's blade sparked against the rock. She looked tiny now, with a dark stain on her sleeve and one arm limp, but her sheer spite kept her moving. Voss limped after her near the broken socket, still scraped up and covered in white powder from my fire extinguisher. The dark crescent pulsed a violent red against the wall, its short chain anchoring him directly to the harness on his chest. It was the very leash that dragged him through the failing portal. I slammed my hand down again, but Na caught my wrist with her uninjured hand. She lay on the floor right beside me, blood soaking her sleeve while her jaw was clenched tight with agonizing pain. The stairwell door hung completely crooked from the portal's massive pull. Those two guards had been dragged straight back through the shattering mirror. My place smelled heavily of fire extinguisher chemicals, stale water, and scorched electrical wiring. "Stop," Na said. "I can see her, but seeing is not touching. Thank you, Nurse Fortune Cookie." "Mercer," that sharp tone cut through me better than stitches. She pressed gauze against my left forearm. One abandoned sword lay cold beside the table. Mina spotted it before I did, because apparently pain could not steal her knack for being irritatingly useful. She kicked the blade right under the refrigerator, then slumped against a table leg, her teeth tightly gritted through the pain. Na told me my side was a total wreck, but Mina's was worse. Both were true, and I knew it. She used her uninjured hand to tie my bandage, then patched her own arm, looking absolutely offended by her own biology. Next, she reached for my right hand. My torn glove was wet where Mara's red-marked palm had touched my skin. The bruise underneath had gone a deep, ugly purple. It was the color hands turn when they are thinking about retiring. Down below, Mara dodged a Black Banner spear, grabbed the shaft, and slammed the heavy butt right into the guy's knee. She did not look up until she had room to breathe. Speaking through the silver, she said she could not reach, asking if I was hurt. Later, that word felt like a battlefield hospital with awful manners. Up on the chapel stairs, Voss started screaming. He ordered the granary yard sealed, demanding chains for any moving prisoner, as a dark red light gathered above Gallows' crown. Na tied up my forearm with a strip torn from my shirt, telling me to ask Mara what she needed. She called me out for pretending to trust her while only barking orders. The truth stung, and I could only lean over the table, gritting my teeth. I asked Mara what she needed. For a brief second, she actually looked surprised, but that shock vanished instantly because people were trying to kill her, and surprise was a luxury she couldn't afford. She looked up at the red glow above the broken roof, and trust me, her next command was absolutely wild when the other hand comes, hold it. Nothing else. Suddenly, Owen's voice cut in from below, rough with pain and exhaustion, warning us that this was complete suicide. Mara snapped, telling him to stay put and make things difficult. Owen opened his mouth, ready to argue, but he stopped. For a guy like Owen Pike, holding his tongue was practically a lifetime vow to the idea of restraint. Mara gestured with her dagger, ordering them to guard the stairs and tell Rafe to slip over to the chapel edge. Celeste's runners kept the wounded off the main lane, while Della put hungry looters to work. Her commands moved much faster than fear. Celeste's runners slipped through the yard like ghosts, dragging the wounded away by their belts and sleeves, and saving their dignity for later. Dela caught two recruits trying to sneak off with a sack before the doors even opened, shoving them back. "You want food," she screamed, "then carry it where the kids can reach it." It worked way better than shame, because hunger understood physical weight. Still, those chained prisoners didn't magically become noble overnight. Some fled, while others attacked the nearest guard until they were pulled away. Others just stood there weeping at the granary doors, because to a starving person, hope felt like another cruel trap. Mara didn't demand their trust. She just gave them jobs, and slowly, their broken army pulled itself back together. Mara snatched Voss's brass speaking horn from a fallen herald and scrambled up onto a broken cart. Her voice echoed across the lower yard, too sharp for anyone to ignore, announcing that food was inside those doors, not in Voss's greedy pockets. "If you want grain, survive long enough to carry it. Being useful mattered far more than being inspiring. Starving recruits stopped fighting and rushed toward the granary stairs, while prisoners dragged broken carts to build defensive barricades. The former Black Banner men hesitated until Sable's forces suddenly pushed forward from the chapel courtyard. Owen stood at the first step, hammer held low. Suddenly, a spear pierced the crowd, striking his left shoulder and disabling his arm. And honestly, seeing that weapon pierce him was absolutely devastating. Owen grunted like a stubborn door in a storm, slamming his hammer sideways into the attacker's ribs as his left arm went limp, but his right arm kept swinging. I yelled about his shoulder, because stating the obvious is all you can do in madness. Celeste yelled back through the thick smoke, telling me she could see, and to shut up unless I brought her a spare arm. Na let out a painful laugh, wincing as her bandage pulled. Then, Wraith appeared near the chapel edge, a sliver wrapped in his cuff. He looked like a bad decision beaten for honesty, and every painful breath he took left him completely doubled over. Still, he crawled to the cracked frame and lifted the sliver toward the table, rasping out his delivery. He joked that if the roof collapsed, we should tell his dramatic remains he was punctual. Mara told him to save his charm. The dark red light answered him. The light pooled above Gallo's crown, splitting open like a giant, pulsing eyelid. Then, a massive red-gloved hand forced its way through the clouds. Each finger was wider than a tower. The entire fortress fell dead silent, the way people freeze when their gods suddenly show their knuckles. The hand swept toward the granary roof, showing none of Eli Mercer's terrified care. It moved like someone casually brushing crumbs off a table. Stone battlements shattered under just 2 fingers. A massive tower split wide open, sending Black Banner guards and desperate prisoners running for their lives. Crushing wagon-sized stone slabs rained down heavily across the courtyard. One boulder slammed into the broken metal bridge, twisting chrome bars like dry grass. Another crash pulverized the old office roof. Celeste's scouts quickly dragged 2 trapped kids out before the wall collapsed. I watched Mara react. Her face tightened momentarily, then she shoved the survivor to a runner and kept moving. It wasn't cruelty, it was cold survival instinct. Suddenly, the giant red hand swept down again, crushing a group of guards dragging prisoners back to the yard. Everyone scattered in panic. That monstrous hand didn't care who was who. But for me, the only thing that mattered was the sheer terror of hitting the wrong person. He was just annoyed by the resistance. Voss looked up with an almost relieved expression, proving he had learned absolutely nothing from this. The hand didn't love him. It didn't even notice him. Desperate, I yelled her name, calling out for Mara. She was already moving, shoving 2 kids under a heavy cart as giant red fingers ripped through the roof above. Silver at her neck flashed brilliant white. The dark socket flared a violent red. I slammed the table again in pure desperation. Just a freezing wall, no miracles, and my hand useless as a god attacks. Voss raised his blade toward the yard, ordering Captain Sable to burn the family pens and blame me. Sable froze halfway down the steps. Those pens sat behind the yard, iron cages Voss kept as insurance. Innocent women, elders, and children wearing ration scarves. These weren't enemy prisoners, they were the families of his own loyal soldiers. The very girl who had called out to Sable earlier now gripped the cage bars with both of her hands. Sable saw her. Watch his face here, it is not a heroic awakening, just a machine realizing its own kid is inside the grinder. Voss spun around. Sable lowered his crossbow slightly. He muttered that she was his daughter, but Voss spat back to obey, calling those helpless families mere livestock. Labeling them livestock fed by misery, Voss watched Sable raise his crossbow. For one awful second, I thought obedience had won. Suddenly, he shot the torch right out of a guard's hand, leveling his weapon at Voss instead as it fell. The courtyard erupted into complete chaos. Several guards sided with Sable, immediately hacking at locks to free their captive families. Those who stayed loyal to Voss were quickly overwhelmed by the sudden, brutal mutiny. But Mara didn't forgive Sable's past actions. She pointed toward the gate and ordered him to move them or get lost. He complied immediately. That mattered more than apologies. Voss watched his entire army fall apart, his divine patron destroy his fortress, and his starving captives finally rise up, no longer waiting for anyone's permission to survive. For the first time, he looked less like an all-powerful ruler and more like a fool trapped inside his own burning house. Desperate, he fled upward, but he wasn't escaping. He was heading straight for the roof platform, right toward an unsuspecting Mara. I spotted him first because she was too busy pulling a trapped child from the wreckage. Voss crossed the platform in seconds, grabbing her from behind and pinning her arms while holding a blade to her throat. Right next to them sat the execution winch, triggered by 2 specific ropes, one underfoot and one hanging above. Voss's power tether ran straight through the pulley above, and the monstrous red hand slowly descended again, locking completely onto her flashing silver charm. I lunged forward, but Nina blocked me with her shoulder. A knife was at her throat. Honestly, acting recklessly here would ruin everything. I hated the harsh reality, then looked down. Mara was dead quiet in his grip, not frozen, just ready, as Voss pressed the cold blade against her neck. He dragged her directly toward the heavy execution chain hanging over the main doors. Voss sneered to make me kneel. Mara locked eyes with me and refused, instantly clearing my panic. Smiling bloodily, he sneered that her mother said that too, making me freeze. Mara's expression remained completely blank. Voss whispered in her ear, but her silver charm carried his words to everyone in the yard. He sneered that Anwen didn't die for bravery. She died for stealing the gate key and stopping the harvest march. Cruelly, he confessed to ordering the bolt, the fire, and marking her doom. Down below, Owen tried climbing the stairs but nearly collapsed as his shoulder gave out. Voss smiled, pleased by his weakness. Mocking her mother, Voss missed the tiny scrape of Mara shifting her boot. She wasn't breaking, just positioning herself. Voss sneered that Mia claimed her mother begged. No, Mara warns, she just kept you talking. I saw her hook her heel under that pretty thin rope, and Voss totally missed it. Shaking violently, Rafe lifts the sliver by the chapel edge. That tiny silver chip catches the red light, shooting it through the table like a needle. Nah looks from the sliver to my hand. Only a keeper's mark opens both halves. No, she snaps, we get one shot. Not a crossing, but a reach. You already paid half the toll with that mangled hand. That is not medicine. Forget it, Mercer, she warns. That is a terrible idea even with proof. Meanwhile, the red hand spreads over the roof. Mara stares at me with Voss's knife pressed hard under her throat. She isn't begging for rescue, she's demanding I finish the job she gave me. Just hold on. Nothing else. I rip the fresh wrap off my right palm as Na swears at me with real fury. She grabs my wrist, aiming that glowing drop instead of letting me fumble it everywhere. I slam my bleeding palm against the silver line in the brass rim, right where the old table pattern loops under the glass. Down below, Rafe presses the sliver onto the chapel stone. Suddenly, a wave of agony rips through me, completely blanking out the room. The barrier breaks. This portal is incredibly narrow and unstable. Here is the crazy part: we have 60 seconds before this unstable rift collapses. My hand plunges through, and the crowd down below starts screaming. Voss yanks Mara back, expecting me to attack him. I'm not. Dragging myself away is the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than escaping fire, harder than when she kicked me. I reach past Voss, ignoring the knife I desperately want to throw, and thrust my bloody hand straight into that descending giant red glove. Flesh slams into leather right over Gallows' crown, cracking the roof tiles beneath us. The red hand halts exactly one tower length above Mara's head. For once, that voice slips. He loses his calm completely. He claims an unauthorized observer is interfering. Yeah, I snarl, not knowing if he can hear me. Put it on my invoice. Na braces her arms against my shoulder and the table, her bandage soaking through. But Mara's eyes remain locked on Voss, not me. Good. Voss's blade is still pressed tight against her throat. His other hand grips the black socket tether on his harness, while hundreds of starving people wait by the doors, staring up. My hand and that giant red glove clash in the crimson, bloodlit sky. There are maybe 60 seconds left, possibly even less. Right above my wrist, the glove squeezes, bending my fingers back while the table groans under Na's bandaged shoulder. Before the pressure completely swallows my world, I watch Mara lower her heel onto that thin platform rope. Our hands slam together, hitting the gallows crown like thunder. And believe me, from my side, it feels so much worse. My arm is buried up to the wrist, locked onto that red leather glove. Every single joint screams. This glove feels way too warm for cloth, and too strong to be human. The red hand forces its way down. I fight back. Roof tiles explode under the pressure, the ruined tower tilting as stones grind loose. But I keep his wrist pinned just above Mara's head. I'm not being heroic, just holding on. Suddenly, that is the entire job. Na braces her shoulder against my ribs, slamming both hands onto the brass rim. Blood soaks her forearm bandage, but her hands don't budge. 48, she says. Seconds probably. Don't argue with me. The stranger's voice echoes through the red sky, so calmly it makes my teeth ache, telling me I have no idea what I'm protecting. Down below, the crowd screams, as two gods literally fight over their roof. I want to snap back with some legendary, historic line. I know what I'm made for, I say, squeezing tighter to hide my rising panic. My grip is slipping. The glove tears against my skin. Every twist shoots agony through my old feedback bruise, turning my vision completely white at the edges. Table legs screech. Na hooks her boot around one, leaning her weight into my hip. The shattered stairwell door rattles. Both guards have vanished through the collapsed gate, leaving nothing behind but their swords. No one has time for this modern wreckage. Mia hears it, but she doesn't look up. Good. Voss's knife still hovers near her throat on that platform. His other hand tightly grips the black socket tether on his harness. Right below her, the thin platform rope lies under Mara's heel. Above them, the heavy rope holds the execution counterweight. She gave me one task. Hold that hand, nothing else. I watch her stand inside Voss's reach and do nothing. This is easily the hardest rescue of my life. Down in the courtyard, Owen slams into the granary lever. His ruined shoulder leaves his left arm hanging completely useless. But Owen Pike has never needed elegance to be absolutely lethal. Sable's defectors attack the crossbar. None of these guys look like men seeking redemption. They move like men who realize too late that blind obedience has deadly teeth. Rafe crawled along the chute, squeezing the metal sliver in his hand. Every breath was pure agony, but he kept guiding prisoners toward the latch. Left peg, he wheezed. Lift. Don't pull. Pulling is for honest folks and locks built by absolute fools. A woman lifted the peg, the old bar popped, but nothing dramatic happened yet. One door sagged open, scraping against stone. For one agonizing second, the crowd stared at the crack, fearing another cruel trap. Voss had them terrified of food, but then Owen threw his weight against the lever. Sable's men ripped the bar away, sending the second door slamming open and knocking two loyalists flat into the mud. Grain poured out. Real grain. Local grain. It was Voss's stockpile, but he forgot people can reclaim what starvation remembers. The desperate crowd surged forward, and Celeste sliced through them like a gray knife. She ripped open a nearby sack, shoving a handful of grain into the mouth of a little boy who was struggling under everyone's boots. Eat first, she snapped, then carry. Della slapped a man trying to steal a sack. Want to steal? Good, steal for the kids. Suddenly, a former guard tried closing the door. Maybe it was just habit, or maybe pure panic made him stupid. Sable smashed him with his crossbow and shoved him toward the chute. No locks, Sable growled. Nobody thanked him. That was fine. The chaotic panic turned into an orderly line because people saw actual food touching teeth, not just some empty, distant promise. Look closely, that cheer reached the roof, and Voss realized his complete control was finally shattered. He even lost the lie that the Red Hand spared his family. But this roar of starving people took something far deeper from him. It took that private, inner space where control always waited with clean gloves. Dragging Mara back, he snarled to lie about the grain. Her voice stayed low. You already used that trick, she muttered. I kept them alive, you kept them weak. Voss held his knife steady, whispering that her mother begged. Mara stamped down hard on his foot. At the same instant, she slammed her broken cage pin right into his knife wrist. Voss cut her, but not deep. A thin red line opened under her jaw. She weaponized the pain instead of stopping, which was a classic Mara move, but absolutely terrifying to watch from 4 feet above. She twisted under his grip, her injured shoulder giving out as she bared her teeth. I felt my hand yanked forward, the red glove nearly overtaking me. Nena rammed her hip into my ribs. No, I know. Then resist even harder. Mara slipped right behind Voss, grabbing the black socket tether across his harness. He spun around, trying to bring his knife to bear, but she had already looped the cable around the old counterweight winch. Think she begged? Mara taunted. Voss's breathing turned heavy. My mother taught me how to make men listen to the wrong hand, she growled, yanking the tether until the winch teeth bit in. The black socket flared deep red, still fused together by intense heat, showing the glowing keeper mark the red hand had forced through. The red hand's leather glove suddenly twitched violently in my grasp, clawing desperately toward the ceiling. You are damaging my asset, the voice hissed. The price just went up, I snapped. Nina's hand darted under the table toward the iron iris lever. Mara, on my count, she called out calmly. She sounded like she was in a dark ambulance with way too many alarms going off. Her hurt arm shook as she reached for the lever, keeping her eyes locked on my wrist because an early shot would doom us. And you know what happens next. Below them, the crowd heard thunder, but Voss and Mara heard the end of the line. Voss wrapped his hands around the cord and threw his entire body weight backward, attempting to wrench the socket free before Mara could activate the counterweight. Suddenly, the chain platform cracked beneath them. Far below, Finn emerged from Celeste's support line, carrying her blanket on his shoulder and a massive sack in his arms. Of course he was there. Stand tall. Correct the foolish adults who failed. Voss spotted him, his eyes instantly finding Mara. Then he lunged for the stairs. He wasn't fleeing. Instantly, Mara cut the platform rope. The platform plummeted 6 inches. The winch shrieked as the cable snapped violently tight around Voss's harness and the mounting loop. His lunge became a pathetic fall. Mara landed hard on the roof and rolled away. The knife spun away, the socket tore free, and Nina slammed the iron lever down. It clamped down hard on 2 of his fingers before he managed to tear away. That sound? It was worse than any scream. A perfectly controlled breath finally broke right down the middle as the crimson sky snapped shut. My hand slammed the table edge, sending sharp pain up to my shoulder as Nena caught me before I hit the glass headfirst. With one final knock, the broken stairwell door rested against the wall. For once, even my apartment knew to keep quiet. Down below, the cracked, smoking black, half crashed beside Mara. But Voss did not hit the courtyard yet. Instead, the counterweight chain he used for punishing grain thieves whipped through the pulleys, catching his harness. It yanked him right over the granary doors. He slammed into the black banner standard, hanging suspended where every soldier, prisoner, child, and starving parent could see his shame. Still conscious, because the universe loves being thorough, Voss's polished voice was completely gone. Mia staggered to the roof edge, a red mark on her collar and her shoulder hanging low. "You kept order," she said. "Yes and no," she muttered. "You kept the keys." He reached toward the empty red sky, calling out for window 3. Nothing answered. He tried again, louder, but without any authority. It was a desperate plea dressed in old clothes. Window 3. The cold silence that answered was the only honest thing he ever got from the red hand. Corin Voss finally looked incredibly small, twisting against the heavy chain as his eyes fell on Finn down below. Even suspended and completely abandoned, he still tried for one last bit of leverage, kicking off the standard to swing toward where Finn stood frozen with the sack. Mara did not ask my permission, nor did she look up. She simply cut the heavy rope. As the counterweight plunged, the chain snapped him violently upward and sideways, ripping the black banner standard right from its braces. Wood shattered and iron rang out. Voss slammed into the beam above his own granary, going completely limp before the very people he had taught to fear hunger more than his wrath. The heavy standard crashed down right after him, black cloth spilling grain everywhere. Nobody cheered at first, since a fallen tyrant always leaves an eerie silence. People had to check if the world even noticed. Then Finn put his sack down, focused on the spilled pile, and picked up a single grain kernel. He looked up at Mara on the roof. Looking over at me, he ate it. That broke the tension. The children moved first, because adults always make fear too complicated. Kids understand hunger faster. Celeste tried to form a neat line, but failed. Instead, she won by grabbing the nearest sack, making herself the absolute center of the chaos. She scooped grain into tiny hands, then more, pointing them toward others who could still stand. Hunger now spread relief the same way panic once spread fear. Della put the defectors straight to work. Sable lowered his crossbow, staring at Voss's lifeless body as if seeing the shape of every blind order he had ever obeyed. Mara sank onto the roof because her legs finally remembered they were actually allowed to give out. I wanted to reach out to her, but I did not. Keeping my injured hand on my side of the table, I simply said her name, Mara. She touched the silver, breathing heavily. "Still there? Good. Do not act so surprised, it is almost insulting." I was worried. It looked pretty bad from up there. I laughed once, but it hurt so much that Nena told me to stop testing my bruised ribs. Back home, Nena made me sit on the floor while she locked the abandoned swords in the shop cabinet, calling the wrecked stairwell a problem for future us. Future us definitely hated her for that, but at least we were alive and wrapped in fewer bandages. The cleanup took days, then weeks, and none of it was easy. Grain finally left Gallows Crown in heavy carts. Some Black Banner families walked alongside the very prisoners they had helped lock up. Some got yelled at, others deserved worse. Sable kept working with his eyes forward, tightly holding his daughter's hand. Nobody forgave him, of course. And nobody had to. That week, he cleared roads and took orders from Mara without acting like his obedience was some noble virtue. Owen survived, mostly because Celeste bullied him too much to let him give up. Still, his left shoulder never healed right. He complained about it so loudly that everyone knew he was definitely on the mend. Rafe held onto the silver sliver until the very last cart of wounded refugees crossed out of Gallows Crown, then handed it back to Mara. Once normal strength returned, Mara placed the dead shard on stone, and I retrieved it. "Debt paid?" he asked. Mara stared at him for a quiet moment. "Debt named?" she asked. He nodded, an answer that seemed to both crush him and support him. On the 12th day, we buried Anwen properly, putting her to rest near the new field below Iron Nest, where the quarry road meets the water. Far away from any Ashwick-burned square, where people actually had enough food to stand without collapsing. I placed a single fresh chicken nugget beside her grave. Nobody needed it to survive that morning. The massive granary did that. Their own hard work did that. Mara's courage, Nena's leverage, Owen's broken shoulder, Celeste's line, Rafe's sliver, and even Sable's stubborn refusal did that. The nugget was not salvation anymore. Just a simple meal. She made me slice it smaller, claiming it was still too big. I have learned absolutely nothing, but at least I am staying busy. Everyone laughed softly. A few started kneeling. Mara spun. Half the kids flinched. Up, she barked across the field. One old man stayed on his knees, weeping too hard to hear her. Mara knelt down, took his shaking hands, and pulled him up. Stand, she whispered. Eat standing. They did. That became our first real rule before anyone could make things boring. Demands came through the silver piece. No worship as payment. No eating without Celeste testing it first. No spying into private rooms. Local choices stayed in the valley. A woman asked what happens if I disagree with her. Mara looked at me, and I told her I would just lose. That raw answer traveled faster than any speech. If Mara chose to block her silver piece, my entire sky went dark. If Na said my hand was finished, it was finished. If Finn touched the pendant just to insult a pulley, that somehow counted as diplomacy. Mara kept the shining silver half. I hid the shattered black piece in a metal tin, buried deep under heavy layers of cloth, and a serious threat from Na to hit me with a wrench if I ever touched the bare metal. 2 weeks after Voss fell, that tin started burning hot. Na was in my room, wrapping a fresh bandage on my palm. Meanwhile, Mara was over at the Iron Nest arguing with Owen about whether their cheap roof repairs could hold up after the storm. The answer was no. Owen was losing. Then, the shard clicked inside the tin. Suddenly, every single light dimmed. My completely dead phone began to glow. And check this out, it was a live feed of my own room looking down at me. Na froze. She was either terrified or about to start barking orders. Suddenly, the shattered black piece projected 6 burning red dots across its surface. No recognizable symbols. None. Just a useless map. 6 points of blood-red light glowed around our shattered connection. Then that quiet, chilling voice returned. But it did not come from the gallows crown. It came straight from my phone, calling me out. You saved one valley, Eli Mercer, but I own the remaining 6. The overhead view tilted as if some monster was leaning closer over a screen. Na reached for the heavy iron lever under the table. Mara touched her silver piece below. She had definitely heard enough. Her voice cut through, tired but incredibly sharp. Which one do we hit first?